Councillors, we'll make a start if I could get everybody ready. Thank you. Welcome, councillors, welcome to the public and those watching by webcast. While this is a public meeting, it is a meeting for the purpose of council decision making, and I'd ask those members of the public present to not interject in the process. I remind those that are in the chamber that your image and what you say will be broadcast live to the public and is also recorded, so please be mindful of what you do and your comments. You should avoid making statements that might defame or offend, and note that council will not be responsible for your actions. Please switch off your mobile phones or onto silent, as they tend to interfere with the sound system and can make it hard to hear what's going on. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also remind councillors that we've sworn to undertake our duties in the best interests of the Central Coast Council area. We have each sworn or affirmed to faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in us under the Local Government Act or any other relevant act to the best of our abilities and judgment. Councillors, are there any apologies? I'd note Councillor Vincent and Councillor Marquette are apologies, so we'll record that as such. Disclosure of interests. Do any councillors or staff have any conflicts of interest to disclose in the matters under consideration by council this evening? Councillor Holstein, let me just get the microphones working. Yes.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll disclose on 2.2 the Gosford Regional Gallery. My reason to do so is I currently employed 1 day a week at Regional Youth Support Services, which is a not-for-profit organisation that would possibly be affected by this decision. So I will declare a non-significant pecuniary interest and will leave the chamber during debate.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. Any other declarations? Councillor Hogan?
Thank you, Mayor. I will declare a non-pecuniary, insignificant conflict of interest. I've had past relationships with ET Australia. Our organisation has worked with them in the past. It was many moons ago. I will stay in the chamber because I don't think that will cloud my judgment in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Councillor Best.
Thanks, Joan. I would declare an insignificant non-pecuniary interest as CCGT, of which I'm the General Manager of, has partnered with ET Australia, a sister not-for-profit organisation, collaboratively assisting young people in their careers. I intend remaining in the chamber as I don't believe this will interfere with my objectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Best. No other declarations. So, Council, I just move that we receive the report on disclosure of interest and note the advice of the disclosures. I'll move that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sundstrom, all in favour? Carried. Thank you. Invited speakers. So I note the following. Mr Tony Marland has requested to address Council in favour of the motion on item 2.2, Gosford Regional Library. So could I have a motion to allow Mr Marland to address Council? Move Councillor Gail Collins, seconded Councillor Mertens. All in favour? Carried. Procedural motion. So given that Mr Marland will be speaking and that item is second on our agenda, we will move that to the first item to be dealt with after Mr Marland. So a motion to suspend standing orders and consider item 2.2 after the Speaker's address and then the remaining item in agenda sequence. Move Councillor Greenaway, seconded Councillor Burke. All in favour? Carried. Mr Marland, so I invite you to come up and address Council. I remind you that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded and you have 3 minutes, and I'll just get your microphone turned on. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to address Council. I'm here representing 5 not-for-profit organisations who all reside in the Parkside building in Gosford. The building that I'm referring to is the one that's going to be demolished for the Gosford Regional Library concept to be built. If concept 1 is built, then those 5 not-for-profits will be turfed out, and the collaborative service arrangement we've had in place for 16 years will not be able to occur. We'll have to scuttle off into places unknown, and so I'm really here to speak in favour of concept 2 this evening. So ET Australia, along with the other not-for-profit organisations in the building, have been together in that council-owned building for 16 years, and it's really suited our collaborative place-based approach to helping young people. The building, its location, and the way we've been able to work and integrate together has worked fantastically well. For those of you who don't know our services, along with the organisation that I work for, Regional Youth Support Services, also in the building, and Kim McGlory, the CEO of RIS, is here tonight. I'd acknowledge her, and she is of a like mind with me and wants to continue the collaboration we've been working together. We also have an apprenticeship centre in that building, Verto, a not-for-profit. We have Options Disability Services, and we have Relationships Australia. They all operate separately and independently, but we work together in that building together, and we collaborate and we integrate our services. For example, in the school that ET Australia runs, instead of having a school counsellor or a chaplain, Regional Youth Support Services, trained and professional youth workers, provide that welfare service to our young people. So it's that type of collaboration in our building that works particularly well. The concept 2, building a fantastic regional library with a smart hub and creating an educational precinct with our school located in there, will be a really fantastic venue for young people for future generations. Our school currently has 134 students in it. They come to Gosford every day from throughout the Central Coast. For example, 11 of them travel from the Budgewoi ward. 25 of them travel from the entrance ward, and that school is not conventional. It offers something that attracts students who live in South Turramurra, who travel from Hornsby, who travel from Toronto, who travel from Morisset. That school, operating in the Gosford City Centre in a council-owned building, is changing lives. It has a fantastic reputation for turning kids around. It makes a massive difference to them and their families, and obviously it makes a fantastic change to our local community. With RIS's support, we deal with young people who have mental health issues, who have autism, who struggle with anxiety, and really need a safe and supportive and nurturing environment to operate and continue their education and learning. We also operate an adult learning college that's been operating for 40 years. And those people, over 200 people in the building every day, come into Gosford from all over the place. They activate the city centre. The students use Kibble Park for their recess and lunch breaks. So there are 134 kids out in that park twice a day, lively, active young people, fully supervised by teachers and enjoying the ambience of Gosford. That's what has been occurring in that fantastic council-owned building. Concept 2 will allow that fantastic collaboration to build, to be nurtured and to grow for generations to come. The types of students in there, for example, one boy I spoke to, he and his mum this week, he's 13. He was attending a local public school. He's come into year 7. Just recently, he achieved fantastic outcomes in junior life saving. He's now in the Australian national side. Without a school like ET Australia, a non-conventional approach, he wouldn't be able to succeed in his sport. I think that anyone who hasn't been to our building should come and have a look. That's an open invitation during school hours, so you can see a building with 134 students in it, a commercial building in the centre of Gosford. What we've been doing in a 1950s
Ms. Marlin,
building...
can I just check, do you need a further minute?
Yes, please, if I can.
Okay,
Thank you.
Is
that okay?
Councillor Gail Collins, second.
Thank you, guys. So what we've been able to do in a 1950s built building, if you can just imagine, and as I said, you're welcome to come and visit during school hours so you can see the building activated. If you can imagine giving those kids and future generations a brand new building, side by side the local 21st century regional library, with wraparound services from Regional Youth Support Services, with kids from all different backgrounds there together, you can just see a vibrant, activated place in the centre of Gosford City that makes everybody welcome. So you're welcome. I'd invite you to come and visit, and I can see that with Concept 2, it will be a place-making development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Marlin. Are there any questions for the Speaker? Councillor Mertens.
Thank you, Mr Marlin. I've seen this great stuff that ET does, and I thank you for your work. I note that the recommendation that we have in the business papers notes the address as 123B to 125A Donaldson Street. Is that correct to your knowledge, or? So in Concept 2, there are 2 buildings involved. There's the Parkside building that I've been talking fondly about, and there's the building next door, which is 125A and 125B Donaldson Street. Actually, Richard, I'd need to take that on notice. There are 2 buildings as part of the development. I think it's 123A is the Parkside building, 123B is the land behind it, and 125 is the building next door. I'd stand to be corrected, but there are 2 buildings, 2 separate lots, and for Concept 2, it involves both those buildings. Okay, so that does include 123A, is that correct?
123A, 123B, and 125, I think, are the right numbers for those 2 buildings.
Thanks. So my further question would be to staff, is that under consideration? Does that need to be amended in the motion to include 123A, or because it currently just says 123B and 125A?
Who's answering that? Mr Dowling?
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Councillor.
There might be some concern around the addresses that are listed there in terms of being 123B to 125A, that 123A might also need to be included in that for consideration.
That's correct, Councillor.
It does need to be updated then? Thank you.
Any further questions for the Speaker? Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Mr Marlin, for coming in and addressing the chamber today. It makes sense what you're saying about the library, the work hub and the wraparound services. I know that ET possibly owns some land or building around that area. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Thank you, and that backs on to what Councillor Mertens was just asking about. So as part of our success in there in that building, we've actually outgrown the Parkside building. So the ET Australia Board of Directors, all volunteers, all very long-standing members of the community, decided about 3 years ago to look at what else we could do in terms of the growth of our organisation and the services we offer. And we actually purchased the building 125 Donaldson Street. So it's owned by a not-for-profit community-based organisation, so it's now a community asset. What Council and ET Australia have been in discussions about is Concept 2 taking account of that building. So there'll be potentially a deed of agreement, a legal arrangement where ET Australia puts in that building and all the land that's actually probably bigger than the Parkside building in terms of the whole land as a contributing part of that development. So ET Australia comes with the other 4 not-for-profits and with our building. Both buildings get demolished. A new building is created, the development in Concept 2, and that means that all 5 non-for-profits, the Parkside team, go back into that new building. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Marlin. Just a supplement to that, can I, Madam Mayor? And so what is the building and land worth?
Okay, well, if you're offering to buy it from me, I'd probably turn into a used car salesman. But the original purchase we made 2 years ago is probably on the public record. So I think that could be looked up. I'm feeling a tiny bit uncomfortable about disclosing our information, but it's a community asset. We haven't had a formal valuation done recently, but it's in the range of $4 to $4.5 million. And that obviously gets put into the development, and that's how ET Australia and the other 4 not-for-profits end up as being part of the new building. So it's a sizable contribution, if you like, to the way that this concept 2 is going to be developed.
Thanks, Tony. So in essence, you're gifting that to the not-for-profits and then the built-in option number 2.
If we call it $4.5 million, it becomes part of that development. So there are currently 2 buildings there on 2 separate titles. The Parkside building is owned by council. 125 Donaldson Street is owned by the community through ET Australia. Those 2 buildings become the new Concept 2 development.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Councillor Best, you wanted to ask a question? No, you're right. Okay, so no. Oh, sorry, Councillor Burke. Oh, okay. Let's see what's happening. Yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mylan, you mentioned 134 students. We've always in Gosford tried to get as many people as we can so that they can support the community out there and food places and everything like that. How many teachers and cleaners and people would be affected there, Mr. Mylan?
Thank you, Councillor Burke. There are, along with those 134 school students, 12 to 17-year-olds, ET Australia alone have 53 staff that work in those 2 buildings. Regional Youth Support Services have around 25 to 30 staff. 50 staff as well. So there are around 200 to 250 people in that building every day. And because we're not a conventional school, picking up on what you asked, Councillor Burke, we don't have a school canteen. A lot of those students come to school and need to be fed. So we actually organise lunch runs. So we don't permit the students to the shops during school hours because they're there to learn. But a teacher and a teacher assistant will take the old-fashioned lunch orders and they'll run them across to Subway, to Shop 3 Coffee in Gosford. We support them a great deal. It wouldn't be kids if you weren't giving them Maccas once a week, even though we're not that excited about the nutritional value of that, but they go there. So in answer to your question, Councillor Burke, those students and the staff are all in and out of those shops before and after school, certainly, and for the teachers and other adults operating out of that building, they certainly add economic value to the city centre. Those adults drive cars into the city centre. I know parking's an issue in Gosford. They're paying for parking. So they're contributing members of the Gosford City Centre.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, Tony, thanks for coming in. I've got some friends who've got some kids, a son that's had to be put into ET Australia, and I know you're doing a great job with some troubled children. But getting back to what I see the plans there, I see there's something like 3,000 square metres in total between the five groups there. Has the rent ever been discussed with you to date, and what sort of ones on the rental component?
The rental component.
Yeah.
So in terms of Councillor Hogan's question, we're contributing $4.5 million to the development through deed of agreement that signs over our land and our building. So part of the deliberations and conversations with council over time is the arrangement of the potential for strata ownership, so that the not-for-profit groups, the 5 not-for-profit groups that are going into that building, councillor, have security of tenure in that new building. So it's a contribution in terms of the 16 years that we've been in the building paying rent. So going back a step, 17 or 18 years ago, Kim McLaurie from RIS and I convinced the then council to buy the building. It was in private hands, and for the purpose that we've been using it for the last 17 years as a facility to provide community services to young people in the centre of Gosford. The forward-looking council in Gosford at that stage bought that building, and we've been paying around $125,000 a year rent for the last 16 years. So on the spot where I am this evening, I can't probably add that up in my head, but that's a substantial amount, more so than the original purchase price for council. So that building's been a good return, and obviously now is seen as a catalyst project for the CBD. So we've been there and been part of that from the outset. we're now looking with council to be partners in that new development, and Concept 2 gives us the opportunity to have that 3,000 square metres of space.
Okay, so you'll be a strata owner, not a paying tenant. That's where we're aiming to. That's the outcome. Yes. Yeah, okay. No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Marlin. You can
Thank you.
take a seat.
Thank you very much.
Councillors, so we're going on to consideration of item 2.2, which is the Regional Library. And there is a motion on the board. Can I just check, is that the motion the amended motion I sent through, or is that the original one? Okay. Yes, so I would like to move the amended motion, and councillors, I did just provide a version of that on your tables there and mentioned it earlier this afternoon. Do I have a seconder before I speak to it? Thank you, Councillor Best. So, councillors, the difference, or what I've put up on the board as the amended motion, is looking at Concept 1 and Concept 2. I suppose I am a little bit hesitant about the investment required in Concept 2, although I see its merits. And so the motion that I've put up on the board is to proceed with the initial Concept 1, but with a view to that it can be enhanced or increased, and that council seeks some commitments before they commit to that larger scale development that might be similar to Concept 2. The other element of the amended motion on the screen is to look at the RPAC and the Regional Library as a connected space. So assuming or depending on what the council decides in relation to RPAC, there is an opportunity to look at a precinct, and so this motion provides that little bit of flexibility in light of the Minister's announcements earlier this week. And the other key part of that is to continue to work with ET Australia in whatever we go forward, with the view that we do not want to impact on their continued operation in that area. So that is the basis of the motion that I've put up on the screen. Councillor Best, thank you for seconding that. Did you want to speak on this?
May I have some questions of staff, possibly prior to making comment? Would that be okay?
Yes.
It may go to Mr. Dowling, I think, first up. Through you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Dowling, carrying on from Councillor McLaughlin's comments on the business plan and the floor space, we've got quite a few thousand square metres in Concept 2, as I understand. We're dealing with Concept 1 here, but the whole lot's on the table as we speak. How much of Concept 2's multi-thousand square metre space has been pre-leased in this program so far?
Through you, Madam Mayor. None of the space has been pre-leased, Councillor Best. That could only be done following Council's resolution to proceed with this space, see it fit to do so.
So from a commercial point of view, of which you have vast experience in, what percentage of the complex would you expect to be pre-leased before council would sign off on it to go forward?
Through you, Madam Mayor. At this point of time, councillors, if the resolution before you is to select a site, we could not pre-lease it before you actually chose to move forward with that site. No,
but I understand that, Mike, but subject to all that, once we get to the pointy end of this, you've run terrace towers for many years and created many a building and a Tuggerah Business Park to boot. If someone came into your boardroom and said, listen here, I'd like $60 million, $50 million, what kind of pre-leasing commitments would you like as the chairman of the board?
Through you, Madam Mayor, a 30 to 50%, Councillor Best.
Yes. What's the cost of the total cost are we talking here, concept 2? Might help there on page 145.
Through you, Councillor, through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Best, 24 million construction cost, just raw construction cost, or around 27 project cost.
And concept 2?
I beg your pardon. Through you, Madam Mayor, that is concept 1. Concept 2?
I'm just looking on page...
$64 million construction cost, Councillor Best,
Yeah.
for option 2.
That's 64 million construction cost.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Best.
And what's that's construction cost? What about peripheral costs? I mean, consultants, you know, staff time, all those other ancillaries to construction cost, and also land acquisition costs. What kind of numbers are they looking like?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that would be in a vicinity of around 67.5 million, Councillor.
So we've gone to 67 million. I have to pardon me, but I'm trying to read 455 pages, of which 255 are in confidential. I've done it in 30 hours, and we just had some rather interesting discussions on other subjects this afternoon. So pardon me if I'm not quite up to speed. We haven't got any geotechs on this yet, have we? Have we?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, yes, we have. We have geotech, yes.
Right. And Douglas Partners might have come back with how many geotech holes, do you think?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, we've done 3 core boreholes at strategic locations on the site to determine the actual ground conditions.
And how many thousand square metres is the entire footprint of the site?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think I'll have to refer to Mr Barclay. It's around 3,000 square metres.
So 3,000 square metres, and we put down 3 holes to ground truth.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, the site is such, the Parkside building is built virtually to the boundary. The site bores were sunk on 125 Donaldson Street, which is the adjoining property, up against the boundary to give us as close as to appropriate location as we could.
So could you give us a fairly firm guarantee that the geotechs will come in at the budget? The 3 holes?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, as we have a contingency factor in there built into in terms of ground conditions, but until we effectively demolish the existing Parkside building and do further geotech underneath there, we won't know the true ground conditions. However, the core holes would indicate, particularly the topography along Donaldson Street there being consistent, that it shouldn't be that far different from what we've ascertained already.
Okay, and finally, on the same page, it says there is $15.1 million currently allocated to the project, consisting $7 million federal government. Development community grants programs as well as council's commitment is 8.1 million. So I'm just trying to get to how much we've actually got in the bank. We've got 15 million in the bank to this project, roughly? Is that, I mean, I'm genuinely asking, I don't know.
Councillor, yes, we have, Councillor Vincent. Councillor Best.
So where does the other $50 million come from? Just the nearest million will be fine.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, there is an attachment 4 to your report.
I understand that.
Which sets out the cash flow from 1819, 1920 and 2021.
And lost opportunity costs, is that being assessed in the global kind of discussion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, the future funding of the project would have to be determined in accordance with the delivery program and other projects associated with council in the future.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate your efforts in the documentation. Madam Mayor, I would just, in light of this, I hear from my colleagues, but I'd like to retain my right, if that would be okay.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Do I have any other speakers on the item? Councillor McLaughlin?
Yes, the very initial meeting we had, council came in and said, we've got funding available, we've got to move quickly on this. We'll get a business plan on it, but basically the business plan was on $450 a square metre for Plan 2. Did we ever get that business plan? I never saw anything come through.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yeah, that was there was a detailed briefing to councillors in relation to the feasibility, Councillor McLaughlin, and that was given to councillors a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So on my calculations, the restaurant's got to pay about 330 grand a year rent. Would that be right?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and that's why we were directed as we did to go out and we did to get independent rental valuation on the development, which Knight Frank supplied, which is attached to your report, Councillor.
And the library, on my calculations, got to pay about $1.5 million in rent. That be, are we going to pay that to ourselves in rent?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor, the library, as indicated by the Speaker tonight, pays a rent of around $125,000.
But on the square metre, 450 square metres, I've worked out at 1.5. Is that correct? Or
sorry,
am I reading it wrong?
No, through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor, the proposal moving forward is for for ET Australia to occupy this space under strata, as would the library component, as would the commercial space, Councillor.
Well, if ET were paying rent, they'd be paying 1.79 million, is that correct, on 3,000 square metres, on 450?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I haven't got a calculator with me, Councillor. I could calculate that out for you and come back to you.
Yeah, that's where I just from the outset I was just concerned on the 450 square metre whether it's achievable. That I'm very much, as you know, for development, for employment activation, but I think at the same time we have to be realistic in what rents we can actually achieve to make it work. So that's my question, just on the business proposal. If you said you've got to get 30 to 50% leased, would we get that before turning soil or not? On the pre-leasing, would that be the business plan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor McLaughlin, that would be the intent, as would be the intent with every such commercial venture, to get maximum exposure, maximum pre-lease before we start construction.
And would our funding be affected if we didn't get it, or what would happen if we couldn't make a start?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor McLaughlin, the development is such that we can go ahead and construct the library and the ET Australia and the commercial, so long as we future-proof the development with the appropriate car parking and foundation element.
Yeah. Okay, thanks you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Best.
One question, if I may, through you, to I think Julie Vaughan. Julie, how many libraries, Julie, are actually in the old Gosford LGA?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best says 6.
I thought it was 7, actually. It's all right, but we're near. I'm getting some help up there. Well done. Hang on, Madam Mayor, they're leading the witness. 6 are there, 6 libraries. And this being a regional facility that we may potentially be spending $64 million on this business plan if this motion isn't carried and we go to option 2, how many of those libraries in the regional plan are going to be obviously closed because the regional library will take up the slack?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in 2015, the former Gosford Council commissioned the New South Wales State Library to do a review, which actually heavily informed the business case and the planning for this particular project. That particular review identified that Council needed to review the operations currently at Carryong, which is a reduced and very limited service, and also encourage the operations for Council to continue to investigate opportunities around rationalising the libraries out at the peninsula and potentially merging facilities such as Umina and Woy Woy into one bigger and larger, more appropriate library. So there's certainly opportunities for Council to continue to review all of its services, and that is also part of our 18-19 business plan to obviously review library services across the region beyond that. But the library review certainly identified a significant gap and under-resourcing, which led to the identification and need for the Gosford Regional Library.
Thanks, Julie.
Councillor Best?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to support the resolution before us tonight. And look, what I think we've got here is we don't have a lot of time. We've got a lot of knowledge we're trying to take on board, and it's very, very difficult to get the right answer. But look, from the get-go, Mr Glendenning and to Mr Dowling and everyone else who's contributed in the wings, you've done an enormous job in a very, very short space of time, and I appreciate that. I think the council does too. This is an enormous situation, and when we get to the RPAC, it's really going to be even more noticeable, the pressure the council's under to make a good decision. But councillors, and I think too there's some kind of competing and conflicting issues, and Tony, wherever he's gone, thank you for speaking tonight. You do a great job, and we work well with you when we do at group training. But I think we can help ET and the other not-for-profits, but I don't think we need to confuse that help with a $64 million bill, a $50 million overrun on what's currently on the bottom line of the council books. I think we can help Tony in many other ways, and we all want to help him. I run a not-for-profit for youth. Let me tell you, that area at 17% unemployment needs all the help it can get. But I'm not sure that confusing it with a library build to help ET and the other 4 not-for-profits is really where our headspace needs to be. It needs to soberly be with the budget of the council and the concerns that we're going to be creating something, as Councillor McLaughlin, who is a professional in the field, has tried to enlighten us to, that you're going to have a business situation with a very, very average plan. I mean, you cannot go forward. With the greatest respect, Mr Dowling, in your previous role, I believe if someone came into your boardroom with this business plan, I think they'd exit via the window, you know, and that's most probably how most boards would treat a deal as flimsy as this arrangement, and we're going to put in $64 million. This is like the RPAC in many ways, Madam Mayor, and with that, as we'll get to it, and I'll repeat my comments, we are being asked to sign a blank cheque. The builder is going to get themselves an enormous open chequebook with overruns and extras as the holes are drilled and the asbestos is discovered, and what's buried in the site will be discovered, and all the other things that will be discovered with the soft rock which is down there. Soft rock's code for $1 bajillion of underpinning and shoring, which is the RPAC as well. So I just think that we should hasten cautiously. We should support Tony. I think Tony's support is almost a separate discussion to creating a library. And I'd like to know in my 9 seconds, where is the howling community need for and call for a $64 million plus overruns plus around 20%, maybe $80 million building? Where is the community howl for that? E-books are coming up, bookshops have disappeared. What are we doing? And I'm doing it in 30 hours. Give me some help here.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak against the amendment to the motion. For a few reasons. One, and I'll take on what my friend over there, Councillor McLaughlin, often says, which is I was elected onto council to actually do something, and that's exactly why I'm here. And I'm here because of community. And it really saddens me to hear that what we're going to end up here is with a library and all the services are turfed out onto the street. We talk about place-based servicing, we talk about high unemployment at 17%, and here we are, we've got a big decision to make. Yes, I understand that there's not enough money in the coffers, but we need to be working strategically and we need to be working together on these types of issues. We hear, every briefing we hear homelessness, DV, high unemployment. I'm from the Budgie ward, I'm from the north, and it's often said to me that, you know, we don't want all our money going into Gosford. Yeah, that's a fair statement, but what's also fair is that our young people need places to go to, they need employment to go to, they need to be trained, and they need to move on. This type of concept gives them the opportunity to do that. When we're talking about libraries, we're not talking about the conventional Dewey system, I think it was called. We're talking about what young people do today. which is electronic and all sorts of ways. Somebody said tonight, who goes to a library? Yeah, young people do. They spend half their life in libraries. And so then upstairs they can go up and have some training. These organisations work with marginalised young people who otherwise don't fit into mainstream. They're the kids we need to be working with. They're the kids that have got mental health issues, they've got disabilities, and they're the ones that go to these services and actually achieve something. And I implore all of you to actually check out what some of these services do. I have heard from Tony Milan tonight that they would be gifting their accommodation plus their land to council. What better arrangement is that? That's a true partnership. The other thing is, within this council, we know that's budgetary restraints, but if we don't start moving on things, we can't leverage off state and federal funding. We can't just always look at the dollar that's in front of us and take the cheapest way out. With a library, great, you've got a library, but where are all these young people going to go to? So, and I really push that. We need place-based servicing and do it well. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Councillor Hogan, I might just ask Ms Vaughan just to clarify that part of the motion, part 5. Were you going to speak to that?
That part, that's your amendment though, is it?
Yes, that's
well, I mean, the way I understand...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the way I understand that from reading it is that you're saying that that the preferred site is concept 1?
Yeah, well, I'll just clarify. The intention of part 5 is to make sure that ET is not turfed out. It's actually to include them as part of the discussion to make sure that they are included in the plan that goes forward, whether it's concept 1 or concept 2. The intention is to make sure that they are included in that discussion and there's some resolution towards that aim, not in any way to turf them out. No, but I believe they sublet to ET. Is that not correct? Yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Hogan, when we reference ET Australia in the council report and in the discussions, the intent is ET have confirmed that their commitment is with their 5 partners, as Mr Milan has mentioned today, but ET are obviously the head lessee and tenant, and they obviously own the adjoining building. So the intention is that the regional youth support services options and other services would also be co-located.
If you want that clarified in that motion, happy to do that, but that is the intention. Yeah. Councillor Mertens, you've wished to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to speak against the amendment and speak in favour of the original recommendation in the business paper. And I'm very pleased to be able to follow Gillian. I think, Councillor Hogan. I think that Councillor Hogan, particularly highlighted this idea that a library isn't just, I guess, a place that it was 40, 50 years ago. It wasn't just a place where you find books and e-books don't make them obsolete. Libraries are a whole new kind of game now. And if anyone, I guess, had stepped into a modern library, whether that be a university library, or a state library, they would see just exactly what a modern library is and how it's not just a place for books. And it's very unfortunate that the Gosford Library, which has served our community so well and so strongly for so many years, but has been a breaking point for decades now. And it's probably an unfair comparison to say that the Gosford Library will be what the new library is. The new library will be a completely different concept because the Gosford Library is so old and in such need of improvement and renovation that it can't do what a modern library should be able to do. We should be looking for the future to build a world-class library on the Central Coast, and reading some of the fantastic comments in the community consultation report have been so heartening. I think that, growing up on the coast and kind of seeing the atmosphere and the kind of the negativity that can go around growth and development in Gosford, especially over my lifetime, and to be able to kind of see a consultation report come back from the community that actually says, let's build this to 70% of people. 70% of people are in favour of concept 2. And that is such an amazing feat, I think, just in itself, It's a testament to the change in mindset that we've got on the coast at the moment. It's a testament to the quality plan that has been put in place by council and by council staff to actually deliver a comprehensive and future-focused solution. I am very happy to be seeing hopefully this motion get up as it was in the business paper. I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity to activate Gosford. I think that having a library with the students from ET and the other associated services and a building which has commercial office space in there as well will absolutely bring Gosford alive during the day. And it'll have people flooding into Kibble Park, it'll have new cafes opening, it'll have new opportunities starting, which I think we can only imagine now. And I think that I would encourage my fellow councillors to have a bit of vision, to have a bit of hope, and to have a bit of trust that this will be a fantastic opportunity, and I look forward to hopefully being at the opening, still as a councillor, I guess, at the end of 2020. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Councillor Mertens. Councillor Mertens, I will just draw your attention to the motion that's on the board. If it's lost, then you perhaps need to be thinking about either foreshadowing another motion, otherwise we won't have anything on the table, or if you wanted to move an amendment to the motion that appears on the screen, that would be another way of doing that. So I don't know whether you want to do that now, whether you want to give that some thought. I have got a couple of people listed to speak, so...
My intention will be to foreshadow moving the original recommendation.
Okay, yep. So if you wish, you can put that up as an amendment now and we can debate that, or if you want to hold off. Why don't I allow the speakers that I've got listed to speak on this, and then if you want to move an amendment, if you remain unconvinced, that might be the way to go. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking against the amendment. There was a motion put up firstly, and then the amendment came up, and I was sort of bewildered with that.
Sorry, Councillor Burke, can I just check? The motion that we have on the table is up on your screen. The recommendation in the paper was not moved, so what's moved, what's currently live, is up on the screen as a motion.
Which you put up an amendment.
No, it's the actual motion. The actual motion. So are you speaking?
I'll speak against a motion.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. And firstly, I'd like to say that ET Australia have been there for 16 years. They're in an old building. That will be brought up to the standards of the 21st century. There's 5 different business services there, one with a disability. Now, we've always wanted people in Gosford. So at the moment, there's 134, then plus, so it's about 200 people in Gosford eating, and there is teachers and students. And we're going to get a building update. I think it's fantastic. Concept 2 is the way to go. So I speak against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Greenaway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a very complex issue, and I have to say that I've been very confused tonight. Firstly, I was finding myself in complete agreement with Councillor Best, which rarely happens, but I was thinking he was making sense, so that sort of concerned me to begin with. But then I was a little bit confused because I couldn't really see what was being lost from the original recommendation to the recommendation on the board. So then I thought, is the amendment going to go up? Because then they could talk about it and maybe I'd understand it. But
do you want to just clarify the motion on the board? So the motion on the screen...
Just how it differs.
Yeah, it doesn't lock us into the concept 2. It says we're starting with concept 1. Yep. We're looking at construction so that it can allow for an increase, but we're not going to resolve that way until we've got some money to do it, or we've got some commitments to do it for money. So that's the difference.
The building structurally will be able to take additional levels.
Yes.
And in the design phase, there will be, you know, the potential to remove the roof and whatever.
Correct.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And ET is part of that package. That negotiation, that conversation is about keeping ET in the picture and their tenants or their partners. Yes. Councillor McLaughlin, are you speaking?
We were locked into one or two, but we're not locked into one or two. We can proceed if the business model came out properly, and we're all in agreement. We could move to two. Is that?
That's the intention. Yes.
Okay.
But we want to minimise the risk, and we want to minimise the drain on our own budget, and look for those partners and commitments. Councillor Gail Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Fellow councillors and executive leaders, I rise to support the motion that is before us at the moment. I ran on good economic management and good financial management. The difference between Concept 2 and Concept 1 is 43 million, according to the stats that I have. We are short 6 million for Concept 1, so with good financial management and good economic management in mind, I'll be supporting the motion on the board, which is for looking at Concept 1 as a starting point.
Thank you, Councillor Gail Collins. Councillor Pillen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to support this amended motion as well. Given the fact that ET will be supported, I will support it. We're looking at 43 million that at the moment is not within our budget. If we were to come up with a JV partnership or to achieve that funding, I think this leaves it open to look at those options. If we don't, then that funding, I think, could cover 43. Generally looking at $1 million to fix up a road, that's a big issue for our community at the moment as well, that it might be another 43 roads that we can look at assisting on the Central Coast rather than putting it towards this the larger option. So that would be my recommendation at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, I do just have two more speakers, Councillor Best. I would like to hear from them, if I could. Councillor Sundstrom.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a couple of questions which I'd like to kick off with, if I may. And I think Mr Dowling might be the right person to address these questions. The Concept 1 building, the original Concept 1 building, has been costed.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Sundstrom.
Has the Concept 1 building been costed at the proposed variants that are indicated here?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, Councillor Sundstrom.
Could you give me an estimate of the increased cost of building Concept 1 so that it was sufficiently strong to uphold up to 9 storeys?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Okay, Councillor Sundstrom, councillors. From a buildability perspective, you firstly have to ascertain the future or future proofing of the development, as we call it, and that is to not only look at substantiating a lot larger foundations and columns through the development to be able to take higher levels. You also have to ascertain obviously what that end development will look like potentially in the future if you were to add. The biggest issue, of course, in this development is the fact that we are subterranean with our car park. And if you were on grade with your car park as well as the development, it would be a matter of putting in more substantial, if you like, foundations, footings and columns. With this particular development, because this car park is subterranean, you have to predetermine as such what level you're going to go to or build to in the future. Yep. It's not something you can come back at a later date and continue to dig down further as you need further car parking requirements to satisfy the FSR requirements around planning restraints on the site.
So in that case, would you say that we've got sufficient information based on the current business paper of an indication of the cost difference between Concept 1 and Concept 2?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Sundstrom, yes, through Concept 1, Concept 2, because we anticipate building commercial tower on top. So in terms of the foundations, a reasonable amount of the cost is associated with the increased foundations and subterranean car park associated with levels with the second proposal. Should we proceed with this amendment, there'll be obviously a need to refine and further look at the costs associated with incorporating the library plus potential for ET, plus any future proofing of development.
So then just to return to one of the earlier questions I asked you, we can't determine the cost of the reinforced or bolstered version of Concept 1.
Through you, Madam Mayor, at this point of time, as we stand or we sit in this chamber, the answer to that is correct. We can't.
So then, in fact, we don't have enough information to be able to compare the cost of the reinforced or bolstered Concept 1 with Concept 2.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Sandstrom, not as we sit in this chamber tonight.
Okay, thank you. And further question, the geotech survey that would be required to get a real good grip on the original Concept 1 compared to the second version of Concept 1 and Concept 2. I imagine there would be different requirements at each of those various concepts?
Through you, Madam Mayor, councillors, the geotech, as I've previously indicated, was done on the adjoining site, as close as we could to the boundary, as well as some towards the rear of the existing Parkside site.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to do geotech within the existing Parkside site. However, it's it's within 10 metres of the actual site that we would be excavating.
Once the demolition work had been undertaken, would there be further geotech survey?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Sandstrom, and that would be in line with the negotiations around a construction contract, whereby in a construction contract it'd be appropriate no latent conditions clauses with the risk associated with geotech and subterranean works be the issue of the builder.
Okay, thank you. Now I would like to speak against this motion. So I agree with my colleagues, Councillor Mertens and Councillor Hogan, that we need to be on the game with this project. I think that we need to be ahead of the game regarding the development that's happening and proposed to happen within the CBD at Gosford. I think we should be able to expect quite a bit of assistance from the state government. They've made a commitment to help revitalise Gosford City, and when they did that in the city of Newcastle, they were able to provide around $650 million. So we're talking about a matter of a few $1 million here, an unknown number of millions of dollars difference between the second proposal for Concept 1, and I think that the potential that we all looked at for Concept 2 should be realised, and I reject the motion that we have in front of us, and I look forward to the foreshadowed motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. I might just ask Mr Dowling, point of clarification. Councillor Sundstrom raised concerns about the additional cost of the motion that's on the board. Would it be safe to assume that it's going to be significantly less than $64 million? It is a loaded question.
Through Madam Mayor, it's definitely a loaded question, and the answer to that is yes.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
I rise to speak against this amendment on the basis that it is not costed, and even without the costings, it is quite clear that if we are to go ahead with this, and we are indeed to go ahead with option 2 in time, that the cost will blow out, and it will be because at 5 minutes to midnight we had these little red lines presented on a piece of paper in front of us. There's no timeline here. You've got to look at the industry, you've got to look at the market, and you've got to look at delivering infrastructure, and you've got to be ahead of the game. If you're going to build half a building and then potentially in 5 or 10 years later build the other half of it, it is only going to blow out the costs immeasurably. This is not good enough. People of Gosford paid either an SRV or a levy, depending on who you're talking to, for 30 years. They didn't want a building half built that then is going to end up costing twice as much as what it would have cost if you did it right the first time. We're in this chamber to provide long-term leadership on a regional level, and if we vote up this amendment, we're doing the opposite. We're running away from responsibility, we're hiding our obligations, and we are putting a huge impost on the people of the Central Coast from an economic point of view, and we're holding us back culturally, educationally and socially. This is ridiculous. If you think of this, it doesn't even have a time frame. We're expected to make a decision about something which is costing tens of millions of dollars and could potentially cost any amount of money after that on top of that, because we've only done half the job and we've done an inadequate job. Then we've really got to look at ourselves and say, do we want to be responsible for building half of the building that everyone's been waiting for 30 years for, and then having it cost twice as much when we do the rest of it 10, 15, 20, 30, 60 years later? This is a joke. Put it to a vote. We'll see what happens. We'll see who's in here for the people. We'll see who's in here for business, for local subcontractors. If you build option 2, you'll have an economy of scale where you'll have high quality trades, you'll have high quality businesses, and you'll have high quality jobs in Gosford. And that's what we need, because all the best construction workers that live up on the coast move to the city to work on the big jobs. We need big jobs in Gosford. We're going to have all these new apartments. People will need somewhere to work, to study, to play, to learn. Their kids are going to need this library. Me and Richard missed out on it because 30 years ago we said we were going to have a new library. We put an impost on the local residents through their rates for 30 years. And now we're saying we're going to build them a 4-storey, tiny little thing when they expected more. They want us to be bold. They want us to have imagination. They want us to make decisions and to build things that are going to last for 20, 50, maybe even 100 years. You go to Europe, you go to America, they don't build buildings that are designed to last for 5 years and then get knocked down or then topped up on top of it. They build things that are made to last. They make things of quality. We need to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Greenaway, I have got you listed, but did you speak previously? All right, what's your question? Councillor Greenaway, yep.
No. Could you please explain, sorry, I just don't know what's happening tonight, but could you explain, please, what is going to happen to ET Australia under the motion on the board? Like, are they or are they not going to be tenants in this proposal?
Well, that's not explicitly stated in the motion, because what the building might look like is not determined at this point, but it is the intention that they are provided for through this motion in this precinct.
In the one on the board, if I
Yes.
was to have it in my imagination, I'm imagining a library with ET and its current tenants in the same building before you have to go to stage 2.
I don't know whether that's the commitment that this provides, but it commits to having those conversations and negotiations with ET to provide for them in that precinct. Yes. Sorry, Councillor McGregor, I think we're dealing with Councillor Greenaway at the moment. Yes. So, Councillor Greenaway, I am going to move it on. I know that Councillor Mertens is foreshadowing if this is lost, so I will just close debate. I will just make a few comments. I do take on board the responsibilities that we do have as a council in sound financial management, and one of the points that I refer to in our Act is this requirement that council spending should be responsible and sustainable, aligning general revenue and expenses. And I think to proceed with option 2 at this point is not aligning our revenue with our expenses. And although we do want to be enterprising, we do want to see innovation, I think there is a responsibility for our council to limit the risks that we expose our ratepayers and our residents to. Certainly also bearing in mind a further decision this evening on the RPAC, and really, no matter what we decide on the RPAC, we will also be looking at some expenditure above what we have in the current coffers. So I would argue that as a responsible council, we should be very mindful of the risks that we're entering on both of these proposals. I think the motion that's before you seeks to limit that risk, provides the opportunity for a development that meets some of the objectives of Concept 2, but really seeks to get some commitment whether it's through funding proposals or whether it's through commitments of partner organisations before we proceed down that path. So on that basis, I put the motion that is on the board, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Best. All in favour of that motion, please raise your hand. Councillor Gale Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Councillor Best and Councillor Smith. Just keep your hand up so I can do the count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed. Councillor Mertens, Sundstrom, Matthews, McGregor, Greenaway, Burke and Hogan. So that... Yep. Sorry. So I'll stand for a division as well. So those in favour of the motion on the board, Councillor Gale Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Best and Smith. Those opposed. Councillor Mertens, Sundstrom, Matthews, McGregor, Greenaway, Burke and Hogan. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Mertens, did you want to put forward your foreshadowed motion? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Mertens.
That's okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would so move that the original recommendation as found in the business paper now be considered.
So you probably need to identify the concept in the actual wording, so you need to just modify that, tweak that a little bit.
How would you like me to do that, Madam Mayor? Or
well, I think in number 1 you want to advance the development of concept 2.
Yeah, sorry, concept 2, that would be correct.
And if we just go down a little bit. So I think you can delete the if council resolved to proceed. Oh, well, no, you can probably leave that in actually. Oh, okay. Well, okay, you can take out the if council resolved to proceed with concept 2. And was there some change needed to the actual address, 123A? No, that's fine. Yeah, okay. All right, that's probably what you're needing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We might just go back up to number 1 just to check that. Yes, that's what I thought we did. So replace one single concept and just instead you've got concept 2.
Do you want to move that now? Or do you want to do an RPAC? Or
all right.
Do you want to do an RPAC? No, I think enough information. We'll just proceed with this. We'll do
Do you want to just read that out yourself, Councillor? Mr. Clinton?
Can I also suggest, just to be precise, proposed resolution 4A 123A should change to 123B. I've checked on the Six Maps website and that's the correct lot, DP and street address given on that site. Thank you.
So you've moved that way, Councillor Mertens. Do we have
yes,
a seconder? Councillor McGregor. Councillor Mertens, did you want to speak to this? Or?
Only very briefly. I'm pleased that this motion's now back as it was originally in the business paper. I feel that it better reflects what the community expectations are and what would be best for Gosford moving forward. I thank all the councillors who have spoken against the previous motion in favour of this motion. I think this will be a great move for the Central Coast and I hope that it gets up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mertens. Councillor McGregor, as seconder, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I've already spoken before on the previous one, so I'll be brief. This is about us being bold, this is about us having vision, and this is about us providing the leadership that the community demand of their elected political representatives. We're not going to shirk responsibility, we're going to provide the infrastructure that the people of the former Gosford City Council had been waiting for 30 years. For 30 years, I think they deserve, or we deserve, an iconic building. I think we deserve to have an integrated precinct, and I think we really need to kickstart Gosford. We need to see a Gosford which is a world leader, and we need to see a Wyong which is a world leader as well. People keep saying that the Central Coast doesn't have a regional identity. We might all have our different thoughts and feelings about what our regional identity is, but this is going to be a key asset to our people, and this is going to be something that's going to serve all people on the Central Coast. It doesn't matter whether it's a pensioner who's in there, a middle-aged person who wants some recreation or further learning, or a young kid who doesn't have any books at home, who doesn't have the ability to have the internet. There are large swathes of people on the Central Coast that don't have any internet at home, they don't have a computer at home, and this is about providing an essential educational resource for them. I think back to my ordinary job, which is as a school teacher at North Lakes High School, and I'm teaching my 2 Year 10 classes at the moment about urban development and urban planning and urban gentrification. And a lot of them are saying, look at this, isn't this amazing? Look at what they're doing in New York. Look at what they're doing in Singapore. Why don't we have that here? There's no jobs for us. There's no jobs for our parents. Our parents can only get casual work. We want to get a decent education. We want to be able to go and live in our community with the people that we love and that we want to be around, and we want to have the best quality access to things. And we don't have it now, and this is going to be sort of at the forefront of providing that. This isn't going to be something that's just going to benefit a select few. This is going to benefit everyone on the Central Coast. It's not just about Gosford. This is about the Central Coast. This is regional infrastructure. This is what we've been screaming out for decades, and I can't wait to see it happen. And I can't wait to see the extreme positive impact it's going to have. And I think you'll find that it's also going to bring people from outside of the area to it. It's going to provide an excellent asset for people that live at Somersby. It's going to provide an excellent asset for people that live at Arimba. It's going to be fantastic for the whole of the Central Coast. It doesn't matter where you are. It's not just about Gosford. Kibble Park has finally got forward to the 21st century, and this is the kind of stuff that we were elected to deliver. And I'm extremely pleased to second this motion, and I congratulate Councillor Mertens on doing so. And finally, I'd like to finish by congratulating the staff and the community for supporting this option. Too often we're lambasted saying that we're not supporting the staff or we're not supporting the community and we're only interested in sectional interests. This is about everyone, and this is going to be a great thing. So I look forward to it being delivered by 2020.
Councillor McGregor. Can I just clarify with Ms Vaughan, can you just indicate how much of Concept 2 is dedicated to the library, just to clarify that point?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there's 3 levels of the Concept 2 and then 1 level as well for the ET Australia, so 4 levels in total.
Okay, and that was the same for Concept 1?
Well, the Concept 1 was 3 levels just for the library. So, okay. I mean, I suppose it's also important to note that the library also includes the Innovation Hub, or what's known as a current Smart Work Hub.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sundstrom. Are you speaking, Councillor?
No, I didn't think I was.
Sorry, I've got you on the list, but if you don't want to speak, that's fine by me. Councillor Best, have I got you on the list to speak? Yes?
I commend the previous speakers.
Sorry, Councillor Burke, I didn't have you, but if Councillor Best, I'm happy to allow you to speak first. Yes.
Come back. Am I right?
Yep, you're all good.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I congratulate the previous speakers on what they say. As you know, I was a previous Gosford councillor. The previous councillors over the last 20 years, 30 years will be dancing in the streets. Gosford Council have had various sites over the period of time. We've always wanted buildings in the CBD. We wanted people in the CBD. And we're going to get cranes in the CBD. So I commend this.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Best.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. And while I'm on my feet, thank you for, I think, your stewardship and leadership around seeking the council to be prudent when it comes to its budget restrictions and allocations. I think the original motion covered off the not-for-profit issues that I think Tony outlined here. So we had our cake and tried to eat it too, which doesn't happen often. But councillors, quite frankly, for this council to embark on a $64 million expenditure with the documentation that we've all received is outrageous. It is just simply outrageous that this board of directors of this organisation would accept the documentation that's been forced upon us in 30 hours to make such a decision of $64 million. Well, when you do these things as we're doing tonight,
you end up with outcomes like Port Macquarie did. It's called the Glass House, which ended the council because the council severely got it wrong, because the council of Port Macquarie rushed at it, because the council of Port Macquarie skewed their thinking, because what Tony outlined at the lectern has got nothing to do with whether you go for 2 or not. Tony still gets the outcome in 1, but as the Mayor outlines, we can step forward with this as time progresses and the budget allows itself. People in Hibbard Street, Canton Beach can't get $5,000 from council to fix the stinking drain outside their house. 3 houses have been at me and they've got their kids in the drain and it stinks. I've been past there. They can't get $5 grand out of us, councillors, and we're going to put $64 million into this with 2 boreholes. Do you understand what that means? You clearly don't, because I put 2 holes down when I put my fiberglass pool in at Noraville. To put a $13,000 pool in, I put 2 geotechs down, courtesy of Mr. Cox's department, requiring, you know, me to ground truth to make sure my pool wouldn't disappear. And we've got 2 on this side. Well, what that tells you is that you're going to get something, and Bruce might be able to support this, you'll get something like a minimum of a 20% overrun on this project. That's what you're looking down the barrel of with this documentation, a minimum of 20% overrun. You know what 20% means? $89 million. I'll say that to the camera. $89 million, ladies and gentlemen, with a 20% overrun, this council is prepared to do when Tony is going to get his outcome on the Mayor's sane suggestion from the get-go. This documentation, and the staff have worked so hard to generate it, but you all know, you know in your hearts, Mike, if it went to a boardroom, there's no way it would come out alive. And it's coming into this room. The passion that you display, Kyle and Richard, yes, I hear the passion, but the passion's misplaced because you're going to get the outcome on the Mayor's original motion. But now we're going to go on the slippery slope. You're asking the General Manager in this to go out and start negotiating. We haven't even got pre-commitments. We've got 21,900 square metres of commercial space we're generating in a trending back market. Second-tier regional commercial space we're creating. Admittedly, 4,000 of that's library. But you're backing away from the market. So
Councillor
how do you
Best,
think this will end?
do you need another minute? Or?
I've never had a minute yet, Madam Mayor, and I won't start now, but thank you for hearing me. Please, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thanks. I might sit down just to read this, mate.
Oh, I've got
I just want to read this out as a question more than anything. This is a commercial agent. I got to have a look at the plans, and he ran his eye over it, and this is his email back to me. So I just want you to understand the costings that you're committing the council to. ET Australia are noted to having 3,000 square metres in the proposed building at 450 square metre estimated rental. Will have to pay $1.35 million in base rent, plus approximately $285,000 outgoings plus GST. Estimated gross rent is $1.7985 million per year for profit. Now I understand they want to do a land swap and become a strata, so that rental will be taken out of the situation. The library is at 1,471 square metres. On the same calculation, the library will need to account for 1.588 per annum for their rent, including GST and outgoings. The building looks fantastic. The challenge will be able to find suitable tenants who have the capacity to pay $450 a square metre. The building will be in direct competition with Sydney CBD, Parramatta, North Sydney, Macquarie Park, all which have much larger population and business bases. Without a guarantee of a government tenant for at least 50% of the building, this will be a very, very risky proposition. Now that's from a commercial agent that's had a look at the building. That came in today. So I'm all supportive of the of the quality of the building and commercial space and footprint and all like that. So can I like to move an amendment, Richard, if I can, and that we look at this, but on the basis we do it on a proper commercial manner, and that we do seek pre-leasing commitment before we actually start. Okay, just as any board member would look at, and as Mike said with Terrace Towers, you will want 30 to 50% pre-commitment before we turn soil. So I'm happy to support this if you actually do it on a proper commercial basis, not just write a cheque out, blank cheque out and off we go. We're at $67 million without the blowout, $89 million. And we how much money have we got? 15. So if you're going to do it properly, do it commercially. Don't put the ratepayers in the hole. And there's an elephant in the room, don't forget. Wyong ratepayers have had their increase in rates and the money's going to go to Gosford. You'll cop it. You'll cop it big time at Wyong. Everyone from the north will cop it. About that much money going into Gosford. So what I'm saying to you is do it commercially, do it properly, do what you want to do, but do it with a pre-leasing agreement. Get the 50% government tenant, whoever that is. It may even be council, who knows? It's what the plans are in the wind. We've got sites to sell. We could move up, we could move down. I'm not against the actual doing a quality development, but I am actually against putting us into $89 million possibly in the hole, and that without any pre-commitment. So if you allow that amendment, Richard, that we actually do what you want to do, but we actually seek pre-leasing commitment before we turn soil.
I'll second his amendment.
Councillor Mertens, do you accept a change of wording?
If I can just ask a question of Mr. Dowling, what change to the process will that mean for this motion now? Seeking out a pre-commitment.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Are you asking about the suggested amendment?
I am, yes.
Well, I refer to Ms Vaughan on that because it does have a significant impact on timing around, I suggest, funding, if we're going to seek that. But I'd like to also qualify that, and I refer you to page 246 of the independent assessment by Knight Frank, page 8 of that document, which refers to the suggested assessment of rents. That'll give you an indication of what it is, the range. But I'll refer to Ms Vaughan.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Mertens, we are on an incredibly tight timeframe to commence the project, so any significant delay would potentially compromise our ability to actually deliver this project within the agreed timeframe. So we're already a number of years behind commencement date.
I'll just say, look, I thank Councillor McLaughlin for his suggestion in his business.
Councillor Mertens, I might just get whether you're going to accept that change of wording. If not, there may be an amendment moved. So if you're not willing to accept the change of wording, then we'll see where we go. Okay. Was there interest, Councillor McLaughlin, in putting up an amendment?
Yeah, look, I'll have a crack at it again. What would you like, Richard? What would you accept?
Well, he's not going to accept it, so...
Yeah. I have to put up an amendment, do I?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think, what was your suggested change in wording?
My suggested change in wording was that to add an extra paragraph that said that should number 2, the plan number 2 be accepted, that construction not be undertaken until a minimum of between 30 and 50%, so let's say 40%. 40% of the building is pre-leased. So construction not to take place until 40%.
If you just want to add that in after probably... Oh, well, you can add it at the end. If you go to the end, you can just add another paragraph, I think.
I'll make it 30%. Make it 30% pre-leasing. Well...
so, Councillor McLaughlin, if you could just repeat that wording for the staff, that would be good. The council not commence construction.
The council not commence construction without pre-leasing agreement of a minimum 30%.
Without, sorry,
pre-leasing agreement.
Pre-leasing agreement.
Yeah, at the 450 square metre, at $450 per square metre. Yeah. Per square metre rate as per the business plan.
So, Councillor McLaughlin, just let me see if you've got a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Greenaway, you're seconding that. So we're now debating the amendment that you have just moved, Councillor McLaughlin. Did you want to speak any further on that? Sorry, so just some clarification needed, Mr Glendenning.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor McLaughlin, 30% of what, where concept 2 has...
of the area?
Is it the total area of the site or the total lettable space?
Total lettable area. Bearing in mind ET Australia wants to be a strata.
Yep, that's my point.
So 30% of the total...
Leasing area, lettable area.
Is lettable a word?
Yeah, lettables.
I think it's been a made-up word, but we'll go with it. Lettable area. Sorry, Councillor McLaughlin, did you want to make further comment on your amendment?
I'll just look at it again. Council will not... I'll say council will not... Can I just go back again? Council will not commence construction without a pre-leasing agreement of at least 30% of the business paper or consultation with council. Or consultation with council. So if we get to the point where we have to make a decision about... Well, I'll give you the option of coming back and talking about it and saying we can't...
Councillors, I will just... Mr Glendenning wanted to provide some comment.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor McLaughlin, Director Dowling has raised a point that by setting out a theoretical rate on whatever basis it's calculated, noting that there's a confidential papers, and I'm sure it's not based on that, you don't want to tie the council to a particular rate. It may be higher or lower that you realise when you go to market to achieve 30,
I'd be
40,
happy to be tied to 450.
Yeah, but I mean...
At market rate. Well, the market rate may only be $250, $300 a metre.
Well, I don't think that it's good practice to put in a particular rate because rates will change. At the end of the day, it may be that it's, you can say that it's got to come back to council before construction starts, and therefore council can be the circuit breaker on whether you've reached the relevant return.
I'm happy with something like that.
I just don't think commercially is very sensible, given that the market could become volatile in the future. You may end up with 600 or 100 per square metre, and you just don't know.
That's why I don't want market. That's why I'd rather put 450. But I'll take your advice.
Thank you.
So I think we're changing to that to at market rate. So delete 450 per square metre and just put at market rate. Is that correct? Yes. Councillor McLaughlin.
Councillor McLaughlin. Yeah, that's fine, yeah. I'll accept that.
Thank you. Can I just ask a point of clarification, not of yourself, of the staff? And I'm not sure who's answering this question. My understanding is that we've got, is it about 77 approved DAs for Gosford City Centre currently? Mr Cox? Of that
you're testing
order.
my memory, but from the presentation the other night, that sounds about.
And do those DAs, do many of them include commercial space? Or are they mostly residential?
Predominantly, there's a mix of commercial and retail space, but normally just on the ground floor.
Sorry, what was that last bit?
There's a mix of both retail and commercial space, but the majority of that is just on the ground floor, some, and to the first floor as well.
Okay. So can I just ask further question of Mr Dowling? Has that future development that's hopefully guaranteed for Gosford City Centre, has that been factored into the economic data that we've received around this proposal?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes it has, hence the independent advice from Knight Frank with a range of rentals rather than a fixed rental rate.
All right, thank you, Mr Dowling. Councillor Greenaway, you seconded the amendment. Did you want to speak to it? Sorry, where was that, Councillor McLaughlin?
As per the business paper.
Okay, yes, please delete as per the business paper. No, I don't think he wants to. Councillor Greenaway, did you want to speak to this as seconder?
Yes, I did, Madam Mayor. I think it's very important that we do have organisations like ET Australia and everything protected in these sort of developments. And if we are going to do that, we can't just have a bottomless pit of money, because we don't have a bottomless pit of money. The example that I gave earlier today that was utilised just earlier by Councillor Best was the glass house in Port Macquarie, and that was meant to be costing the council $7.3 million, but the costs blew out to $41.7 million, with interest repayments likely to extend liability to $66 million. So I just get very nervous when we don't have anything like the amount of funding available to put up a proposal that is going to potentially put a hell of a burden on the ratepayers for many years to come. That development also, it was revealed that it would cost ratepayers about $6 million a year to run. Now, $6 million a year is equivalent to $120,000 per week, and I just think that's a lot of money. So I don't know what it's going to cost to have this sort of debt and what the potential blowout is, but I just think it's really important to exercise caution in borrowing money or expending money when there's no accurate costings. And another example can be the light rail. It's had enormous cost overruns, it's had extensive delays. I'm very concerned. I would like to make some other change perhaps to this, that we can make sure we do ensure that ET Australia and its tenants are able to occupy this building, but not at the cost of $61 million.
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Mertens, you're listed. Are you speaking on the amendment? Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak against this amendment. And while I respect Councillor McLaughlin's obvious business acumen with the skill with which he managed to put forward that amendment, and the text message back of a napkin quote that he's received from his mate, I'd like to say that this has been...
sorry, Councillor...
I withdraw.
You've withdrawn? Thank you.
That gentleman is a very qualified commercial agent, knows his stuff, and that is not a back of a napkin thing. That's a proper assessment being done.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. I will note that Councillor Mertens withdrew his comment.
But nor was the independent financial assessment done by the
Councillors, I'll just get one meeting going at a time. Councillor Mertens.
Nor was the financial assessment done by Council's company, also done on the back of a napkin. That's also an equally viable and independent assessment of the value. My great concern now is that with this amendment, is that we're going to end up with no project at all. We have a real risk. This is a project that has been spoken about for decades. It already has a whiff of it's never going to happen about it. I would say that if I was a sensible business person, I would not be entering into any sort of pre-lease agreement, because I would be saying it hasn't happened in the 90s, it didn't happen in the 2010s, it looks like it's not going to happen in the 2010s now. Why would I pre-lease this now? This is, I think, spells a death knell for this project. What we should be doing is moving forward with the original motion, which will create certainty, which will build this project by the end of 2020. This amendment pushes this out ad infinitum. We have no idea how long this will last. I would ask councillors to consider seriously the future viability of this project with this amendment, and I would reject this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Mertens. Councillor Best, you're listed to speak on the amendment, or you have a question?
I don't need. I just like a
question.
Thank you very much. I think maybe Mr. Dowling may be able to assist. Maybe Mr. Cox might have a question in a moment too. He's very busy there. Following on from my colleague, who I'm agreeing with, Councillor Greenaway this evening, which is around the glasshouse operating costs of around $6 million ago, and a $66 million outcome. This project, we're talking at $64 million tonight, with, as we all confess, an interesting business plan attached to it, which could run out to a 20% increase. That's not beyond the pale. That takes us to the best part of $90 million. So what's the operating losses of this public building? I mean, obviously, they've been factored in somewhere for us to make a decision tonight, and I may have missed them in the report, but what's the operating losses? I mean, the art house across the road here loses, don't quote me, I think close to one a year. I think you might correct me, Julie, but it loses, what does it lose a year?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, Council contributes $1 million towards the art house operations.
Yeah, we contribute $1 million to the building behind us, and it's a quarter of the price. What would the contribution be to this building? Maybe we'll keep interest out of it and just go with the operating losses.
Councillor Best, who's answering? Mr Dowling, yes?
Just a general, this is $5 million.
This gets into commercial and confidence stuff.
Mr Dowling has suggested some of the answer to that question might be need to be considered in confidential.
Well, how about we maybe look at an indicative project to the tune of $80 or $90 million in a public space? What would you expect the operating losses to be in something like that, hypothetically, so the community can hear?
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor, councillors, what I can say is that we have taken in our assessment the mid-range associated with the rental income, the net rental income put forward by our independent valuation, Knight Frank, in our estimates. And based on that, the first year's, based on the first year's income, it would give us a net profit, net position of around 2.7 million gross. Then that you would extract out of that the operating costs associated with the library and the smarts hub, etc., which would be outgoing associated with common area, running lifts, etc., and infrastructure. So it did give you a net, still a net position in the surplus, a sizable surplus. We have that's first year startup rent. We haven't indexed that over the life of the property. We index that 3% over the life if you want, out as far as you can go. But the reality is we anticipate through this project we'd operate with a surplus from startup end of first year one. I can't comment on the glass house. I don't know what was behind their assessment, their financial assessment, whether it was done in-house, whether it was done external. I can only comment on the fact that ours were independently assessed.
So with no forward pre-leasing commitments, we'll be positive, you're telling me, in the first 12 months?
No, through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, what I said was that following the first year's rental income of a fully leased building, we'll be operating at around just over 2.7 million in terms of surplus.
Okay, so it's going to make $2.5 million.
Less, that's gross.
We'll just keep this tape for prosperity, I think. And could I ask through you to Mr. Cox? Mr. Cox, you know, as the Director of Environment and Planning, you've got quite a few thousand DAs running through your department annually. What do you see the trend like in commercial space? I'm hearing from commercial agents out of Erina and Tuggerah that the market's significantly softening.
Through you, Councillor Best, I haven't had any recent conversations with anyone in the commercial leasing space, not for a number of months anyway. I'd have to take that one on notice. I mean, that's I can only go on the fact that there has been a lot of development applications lodged. Construction has, on a lot of those developments, has not commenced for reasons unknown to me. A lot of residential developments have commenced, but in terms of the commercial letting, I suppose, feasibility of the Gosford City, I'm not qualified to answer that question at this point in time.
Fair enough. All right, thank you for trying. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Sundstrom, are you speaking on the amendment?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Sundstrom.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the mover of the amendment, if I might. two questions, Mr McLaughlin. The first one is, what information and in what form did it take that you provided to your consultant friend for them to make that assessment? And the second question is, what does the amendment actually call for? I'm right there with it until the last four words, which seem at best to be a vague instruction in a meandering fashion.
Yeah, happy to answer that, Jeff. I rang the agent. The agent said, yes, I've been asked to price it up. You already had the plans out there, so I understand, is that right? Obviously, my plans would have been given to some commercial agents at some stage to price up. You would have done some feasibility on it. You would have asked some commercial agents to look at the plans or look at the...
Yes.
Yep.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor McLaughlin, as I've indicated, Knight Frank were given the full documentation on this development before they assessed it.
The agent I spoke to already had the plans and had already done some work on it. So that's why I say the plans are actually quite... my comments are quite qualified. I did not share any information. I did not leak. Yeah, nice try, Jeff.
Councillors, Councillor McLaughlin, I think
the second one is, basically what I'm saying to you is you get 30% of the lettable area to go, or you come back to here and you get permission from everyone else to push the button on the construction.
I don't think it quite says that. Or consultation with council. Or
consultation with the council. Before commencement. You can say, well, you can add if you want. You can add a change to it before commencement. But that's what it is. I'm actually giving you the opportunity to come back and say, are we going to do this or not? We haven't been able to find a tenant. We've been out in the marketplace. The best offer we've had is X amount of dollars. We're not in the hole for $89 million. We're actually in the hole for $100 million. Do you want to go ahead with this or not? And that's what my intent is, to give you the last opportunity, Richard, to give you the last opportunity to say, do you want to go ahead and do this?
So, Councillor Sundstrom, did you want...
Richard, you've never lived through a recession at your age. That's my comment tonight.
Councillor Sundstrom, did you want those... Councillor McLaughlin's offering just to add a few extra words there, just to clarify that. Did you want that added, or...?
Yeah, just to tighten it up a bit, I think.
So, Councillor McLaughlin, I think what you suggested, or consultation with council before commencement, was that correct?
Before commencement.
Yes.
I'll come back here.
Or approval from council.
Authority or... Yeah. Authorisation. Mr. Glendenning's offering to assist, so...
Yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Best, for your kind words. Can I suggest that after the word without on the first line, put a colon, then start on your line A, colon, not comma, A, and after rate, put semicolon, and then new line, and B. Sorry, all should be after the semicolon before the B.
I think the sticking point was the word consultation. I think they wanted it to say authorisation or something, didn't you? Was that the sticking point?
You could have authorisation or consultation, but I think that that would, for any competent general manager, would cause you to bring back before council before you signed a contract if you didn't have your 30%. But authorisation doesn't matter much.
I mean,
take out before
the reality is the markets are very dynamic. You don't know what you're facing 12 months, 2 years. You start the construction on this, get down a few years down the track and have no tenants, and you're looking at a total white elephant, and everyone's going to come back and say, why did you do it?
Councillor McLaughlin, thank you very much. So, councillors, Councillor Greenaway, I think you've already spoken on this.
I'm just concerned, even though I seconded the motion, that does that now make it more or less an almost a conditional motion? And I'm just wondering how that will go for the government departments that are prepared to provide funding if we now say that there's even a potential that it won't commence construction until X.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think that's probably a valid comment. It's a concern, yes. I mean, you're not committing, you're giving a conditional commitment that those two preconditions one of those two preconditions that need to be met before you'll pull the trigger on commencement of construction, but you're doing everything up to that point. So it's a legitimate concern to express.
Are you suggesting it be changed, or are you saying, I just have
There
trouble?
could be some risk on the federal funding for the library. That's something we'd have to take up with the funding body. They may or may not be happy with that. They may not release the funding until you would get 30% lettable, or council says, yes, please proceed, even if you haven't. So it does create an uncertainty, but as long as you know that's the basis on which you're making your decision.
Thank
and
you.
I guess the other thing, and you know, it's just a concern for me, I think I'm echoing what Councillor McGregor said, that we do tend to get some of these amendments and changes at the last minute. It doesn't really give us a great opportunity to think it right through, and I'm just trying to make it clear to everybody, I should be standing up, it's no longer a question, that I really am in favour of a smaller development that doesn't incur the huge expense, but I don't want to make those other community organisations.
Councillor Greenaway, you have spoken on this.
Sure, but I just think we're sort of, I don't think we're getting anywhere. That's just my feeling.
Councillor Matthews, yes.
And I'm still on.
Previous to Councillor Greenaway asking the question of Director Vaughan in relation to Clause 6, I actually believe that Clause 6 will cause this project not to go forward. We will have nothing. We will not have a promised library that was being promised for over 30 years. ET Australia won't get a bigger building, a bigger space for the children and the kids and our future. There'll be no better library for the adults. There'll be no place, there'll be nothing. Gosford won't go forward. We will just stay right where we are with shabby buildings and nothing. We put 6 in, and that's the death of the library. Kiss it goodbye, kiss the funding goodbye.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. I don't have any further speakers on the amendment. Councillor McLaughlin, did you want to close the amendment, or are we happy to put that to a vote? You'll withdraw your seconding. Let me just check if there is somebody else that would second Councillor McLaughlin's amendment. Thank you, Councillor Pillen. So I don't have any further speakers on the amendment. Councillor McLaughlin, did you want to close on that?
Look, the bottom line is, if you want to be business-like and you don't want to put the council at risk of, I think we've got, just clarify again, it's a $67 million project and we have $12 million, is that correct? $15 million?
15.
We have $15 million and you just want to go ahead and push the button on $67 million without any blowout. It'll blow out by at least 20%, and I just want to know where do the funds come from if we've only got that amount of money?
You're asking a question?
Where will the funds come from if we don't have that amount of money? If we've got $15 million and you want to build a $67 million building, where are the funds going to come from?
Mr Dowling?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor McLaughlin, as I've answered earlier, the funding is over 18-19 current year, 19-20, 2021, Councillor. It's not all in 1 year.
But the alternative is to actually get the rents in, isn't it?
Sorry, Councillor.
What you're saying, if you don't want to accept number 6, is you're saying you're not confident of actually leasing the property.
Councillors, yep, we've got a few too many conversations going. Councillor McLaughlin, I'll get you to finish closing debate.
Okay. On the basis I was elected to be business-like, I'm trying to be business-like, I'm trying not to spend $67 million of the money for a library, which I read a lot of the social media comments.
Councillor McGregor, if you could just allow Councillor McLaughlin to speak.
A lot of the social comments were, who goes to a library? No, seriously, no, seriously. I read the social comments. They said people are going, how much for a library? But people are saying, who's gone to a library? And I don't think there's a public outcry for a library. Not at $67 million without any letting, without it being pre-let. I'm happy for it to do it, but I don't want the risk of actually building a white elephant. And that's why I put the motion up. But in your hands.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Greenaway, you're looking at a foreshadow?
Your original motion,
yes,
with a little bit of a change regarding consulting with ET Australia to, if I could get the wording back, instead of consulting, it was more committing. Committing would probably be a good word.
Councillor Greenaway, I'm like your intent. I just need to check with the staff that we may need to move a rescission motion, as we've already voted on something very similar, which we can do this evening. And sorry. Yeah, I'd like to believe you, Councillor Best, but I'm probably not convinced. So, Councillor Greenaway,
I'm guided by you, Madam Mayor, if we need a rescission motion.
Can I just check with our...
I think there would be the most prudent course of action. So it's not a question. Do you want me to say that?
Ms Sullivan.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it would certainly be the most prudent course of action and would be the most risk-averse to rescind the motion and then put it anew.
And we can do that tonight. Both of those actions is... no, I think we've already voted. I think it... Recommit. So, Councillor Greenaway, are you foreshadowing that you will be moving to rescind that previous motion and resubmit that motion with a minor amendment? Is that what you're foreshadowing?
Well, I'm being guided by the staff on that.
Well, is that your desire?
I desire to be effective, so I'm doing whatever I'm told to do, because I'm not really used to doing rescission motions.
I'll second that.
So if I've got to rescind the motion, I'm rescinding the motion.
Good practice.
No, it can be on the night, Councillor Best. So, Councillor Greenaway, I might just ask you to take your seat while the staff just check that out. We do currently have an amendment that we can make a decision on while we're checking that out. So there is an amendment up on the board, moved by Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Pillen. Councillor Best. Yes, it is being one of those nights, Councillor Burke. Councillor Best, can I just get you...
There's a lot of people around talking. I don't want them talking when I'm trying to listen to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Best, can I get you to take your seat? So I'm going to put the amendment moved by Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Pillen. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand.
Is that me?
Councillor Pillen, the amendment.
Stick your hand up there.
All in favour of the amendment. Bearing in mind that Councillor Greenaway is foreshadowing a rescission motion and a returning to the original motion. In favour, was it Councillor Pillen and Councillor McLaughlin? Those opposed to the amendment. Councillor Merton, Sundstrom, Gale Collins, Matthews, McGregor, Greenaway, Burke, Hogan and Smith. What were you doing? You're abstaining, Councillor Best. So the amendment is lost. The motion that currently appears on the board is the one moved by Councillor Mertens and seconded by, I'll just have to get that back up. So I think we've had a fair bit of debate on that already. Councillor Gale Collins, you haven't spoken on that? Yes, would you like to speak on that, Councillor Gale Collins? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Fellow councillors and executive leaders, I rise to oppose the motion. The public consultation included 1,040 online submissions. 729 of those respondents may have been in favour of the 64 million Concept 2. However, I caution to think that the other 334,000 Central Coast residents want us to spend another 40-odd million on a library, Concept 2. 40 million is a lot of money. It's money that could be spent on our roads, our infrastructure, our parking, our sporting fields, our children play spaces, dredging and our open spaces. We must be prudent with ratepayers' money. Our ratepayers will get a brand new library to reinvigorate Gosford with Concept 1 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gail Collins. Do I have any further speakers on that motion? I'm just checking. Councillor McLaughlin, I've got you listed. You're not wanting to speak on that, are you? I was just checking. I thought you... Councillor Greenaway, I've got you listed, but is that an old listing?
Yes, I believe it is.
All right. So I have no further speakers. Councillor Mertens, did you want to close debate? You could have closed debate on a whole lot of things.
Councillors, we are now 2 hours in. Thank you very much for your patience, and to everyone in the gallery and watching tonight. You know, I guess this is democracy. This is how council works. This is what we're doing. We're trying to build a library. We're trying to build a library. We're trying to build space for not-for-profit organisations. We're trying to build commercial office space in the Gosford, which is so sorely needed, which there isn't any now. We are trying to bring businesses to Gosford. We are trying to create opportunities in Gosford. This is what we're doing. Yes, it costs $60 million. Yes, the federal government is contributing, and I thank them for that, and I hope that they will still want to contribute after this. I hope that we can move forward with this for the community, for Gosford. We have to take this opportunity now to do this, and I would encourage all councillors to seriously consider the independent financial advice that the councillors have been provided, the opportunity that this will create. We can do this. We can do this right now. We don't have to wait another month or years. Tonight is the night. It's been going on for 30 years. 30 years we've had to plan this. This is the plan. This is the plan we've got now. It's a good plan. It's been costed. This is not the glass house. There was no way that that building was going to cost $7 million. No way in the world. We know how much this is going to cost. This has been costed out. It's time to get this done. I would encourage councillors to support this motion tonight.
Put the motion, moved by Councillor Mertens, seconded by Councillor McGregor. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Mertens, Sundstrom, Matthews, McGregor, Burke and Hogan. Those opposed, please raise your hand. Councillor Gail Collins, Councillor Pillen, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Greenaway, Councillor Best, Councillor Smith. Was that just a tied vote? Can we just check that? Could I just do that again? Those in favour of the motion, please. Councillor Mertens, Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Matthews. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll use my casting vote to reject that motion. Councillors, I would suggest we have a 5-minute break to consider a rescission motion, and we might come back to that. Thank you very much. Councillors, if I could ask you to take your seats, please. Councillors. Councillors, resuming the meeting. So you might recall before the break, Councillor Greenaway foreshadowed a motion that she wanted to put forward. So that is now on the board. It is similar to the original motion, however, a distinct difference in item 5, which pertains to guaranteeing ET Australia accommodation within the proposal. So, Councillor Greenaway, beg your pardon? Yes, so moved by Councillor Greenaway, seconded by Councillor Best. Councillor Greenaway, did you want to speak to this? And I would just note we've had a fair bit of debate this evening on this. So.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would like to say just a few words. Firstly, I am very conscious of the time that we're taking to make a resolution on this issue, but it is a very big issue for Gosford and it's a major item of expenditure, and I think when we look back in a few years' time, a couple of hours won't seem like much of a commitment to this project. My concern with this development was the potential to make ET Australia and its tenants without any accommodation. One of the changes that I made to one of the motions that's similar to that we've seen tonight already has just asked that at item 5 that Council requests the CEO to continue discussions with ET Australia to commit to provide accommodation for ET Australia and its tenants within an integrated precinct incorporating both the regional library and the RPAC. So that doesn't necessarily mean these people will be housed immediately above the library. We're looking at somewhere to put them, and we're just making a commitment to them that their interests are being looked after. So I don't need to use my whole 3 minutes, but I just was very concerned about ever putting my hand up for a $64 million library. I understand that a lot of people have been waiting on a library, but as far as I'm aware, being a former Wyong Council person, I wasn't aware that there was ever any commitment for a 10-storey library. I was just of the understanding there was a commitment for a library. I think we will deliver a high-class library, so I'm hoping that my fellow councillors will support my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Best, did you want to speak as seconder of the motion?
Quickly. I know this has taken a while. I hear you, Councillor Hogan, but we are talking about, with a 20% overrun, the potential of a $90 million expenditure here, $64 million. Now, thank you, Councillor Greenaway, for having the capacity to move this last-minute opportunity for us to reconsider what was originally the Mayor's leadership on this issue, giving the Council the flexibility that I think the Mayor responsibly brought to the table so that we're going to talk about it RPAC shortly, and that's bordering on a similar number. This is like $140 million without overruns in Gosford CBD. And I've got to tell the good folk of the Budgewoi ward that that's good for them, that they can duck down to the local library and enjoy themselves down there. Now, I'm not begrudging this facility being built there. I'm not going to get to that Melbourne-Sydney nonsense. But you've got to understand that the Central Coast is now a very, very big region, and we have to have equity and fairness across the expenditure. We've got a library at Tuggerah. It's nearly 1,000 square metres. We got it off Westfield for nothing. Did a deal with Westfield. Gosford did a similar deal, I think, Chris, with other facilities. If we work smart, as Bruce is trying to suggest, Councillor McLaughlin's trying to suggest, and we put business around our discipline, it's amazing what we can create. There's airspace issues, there's a whole lot of opportunities in Gosford CBD if we take a business approach to it, not a bureaucratic, with great respect, gentlemen and ladies, but a bureaucratic open chequebook approach to things where the council relieves the community of as much money as it possibly can in rates, and then these good folk find a way to spend it. That's been the tradition. We've got a whole new horizon, as I've said here. We can actually save money. We can use the efficiencies. This goes ahead with this restraint that Councillor Greenaway's put in.
then we get a reasonably balanced outcome. Tony and his team get what they want. But nevertheless, if you go for the monster project, we've got so many unknowns. But as Julie said, Ms. Vaughan said, libraries are going to close. You are going to be responsible for closing regional libraries. That's what's going to happen. You have to tell the people of Woy Woy they're going to lose their little library, which is the centre of their little place where elderly people go to read a book. That's going to close because Big Brother's come along and created this giant Taj Mahal in Gosford. That's what you've got to explain to people. And the people from Budgie and San Remo and Summerland Point are going to find it really hard for me to explain to them why I spent $90 million in Gosford, and as I said before, they can't get $5,000 for a drain. You've got to think about balance in this room. And Councillor Greenaway has brought balance to the table. I thank her, and I thank you for your original motion.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillors, I don't have anybody listed to speak, so I'm going to put the motion from Councillor Greenaway, seconded by Councillor Best. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Gale Collins, Councillor Pillen, Councillor Greenaway, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Best and Councillor Smith. Those opposed, Councillor Merton, Sundstrom, Matthews, McGregor, Burke and Hogan. I'll use my casting vote to carry that motion. So that motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we're moving on to item 2.1, which is the Regional Performing Arts and Conference Centre. I might just wait for Councillor Holstein to return. Councillors, I would just note that there are a number of attachments that were provided to councillors under confidential, and just flag that if we wish to discuss the information provided in those attachments, we should probably move into confidential. So I'll be led by the councillors if they feel that that is required. No? You are. So Councillor Sundstrom, you're moving that we go into confidential session to debate and consider item 2.1. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Burke. All in favour? You wish to speak? Councillor Sundstrom, did you want to speak in favour of moving into confidential? Just let me get your... Yes.
Just along the same lines as you suggested, Madam Mayor, initially, and due to the fact that these discussions have been in confidential all the way along anyway, so I don't see the reason why we shouldn't continue in confidential at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. Councillor Best, you wanted to speak against?
I ask a question on this. My iPad has given up, I think, at whatever time it is. It's died, so I'm now on a manual copy. But what was moved was that is it 2.1? That the whole of 2.1 goes into confidential. Is that what we just moved? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the opening comments.
Look, I think it is at the moment to allow free discussion about the attachments and the alternate sites, yes. Noting that the decision of the council will be read in open council, as you'd be aware, of course.
I'll speak to it. Look, frankly, Madam Mayor, and I made these comments at the last council meeting this week, Monday, seems like yesterday again. There's a willingness in the room.
Councillor Bass, can I just preempt, if it would give you comfort, could we, should we move that we go into confidential for discussion and then we can come back into open council for further debate so that...
I would very much like, I mean, I don't mind us, there's documents in the back of there's documents in the back of this now that I seriously question as to whether they should be in there. There's government letters in there which really, I don't believe they should be confidential letters. There's no money in there. There's statements in there that I think the public should know about. But for us to shut this down now with another $90 million spend and the people on the podcast get a blank screen,
that you want to build trust up. We heard about trust this afternoon and the importance of having a willingness to open the door, councillors, and that's what this is about. So I don't mind some of the documents being discussed, but I would agree with you. I want the bulk of it to come out so the community can hear how we spend this, please.
So, Councillor Best, I'll just check with Councillor Sundstrom. Are you happy to go that way, Councillor Sundstrom, where the intention is to move into confidential to discuss, in particular, the attachments, and then once we feel that we've satisfied any questions or comments, we come back into open council for the remainder of the debate?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So, was there any further speakers just on the matter of going into confidential? Councillor Holstein.
I am here. I don't understand why we're going into confidential. The item of the RPAC now is one thing purely, and if you only put it down to a one item, is to identify the site that we move forward with. The discussions around that, costs, everything else is going to depend upon whether you agree on what site, because the sites vary. There's costs involved, but it's not a commitment to that cost. It's identifying the site. That for so long, people up here in the gallery that I see, for so long the community have said, where are you putting this? Because you had it in one area, then it's changed. We're only agreeing here virtually tonight on the site. I've got 132 pages that is not confidential, but we're just going to shove it up there and we'll do it behind the scenes. That is not correct, councillors. We should be able to discuss what is the public business paper that talks about the RPAC, and we put our argument forward and we discuss the site. Having discussed the site and got an agreement there, we may well go back into confidential aspects at some point as other things come forward. But I don't know what we are going to discuss this evening that needs to go into confidential, that the community need to be shut out about what our identification of where we believe the RPAC to go. That is, unless we're going to have a secret conversation about we don't have it at all, and I don't think that's the discussion. I hope that's not the discussion. If so, somebody stand up here in public and say, we don't want it at all. Say no, let's get rid of it, let's not bother. The RPAC has to be identified of the site to move forward, to let the government know by, I think it's Friday, isn't it, that we've at least got a site identified. And there's a range of things. No, I don't agree with the officer's recommendation, and I've got a full debate and I've given it to all the councillors in advance of why I believe there's another better site. But I'm happy to discuss that in open council here adamantly. I'm not going to breach any confidentialities, because everything I'm going to speak about is, guess what? It's in the open business paper. I don't understand here why we're moving into confidential. I would like the mover of the motion to explain that to me, because I do not understand.
Can I just ask the CEO to provide any comments about why it might be considered to move into confidential?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Holstein, to date, the identification of which of the 6 sites is going to be selected hasn't been a matter of public knowledge, because there are commercial sensitivities with some of those sites. Some of those sites are either in private ownership, where discussion of this may prejudice council's future negotiations should council need to acquire those sites. The other sites, some of those sites are owned by the Crown, and there are some sensitivities around those sites. In terms of the sites that are owned by the council, I agree with you. There's no reason why you couldn't discuss that, but I suppose the issue is whether you need to have that debate, talking frankly, in closed session, so that you can then come out and have an open debate, depending on where you land. So I understand your concern, but that's the reason to date. Now, there's nothing to stop the council to decide to name all 6 sites in the open debate if that's what you wish to do. It's not the recommendation of the staff to date to do that. I certainly don't recommend that you start talking about all 6 sites, because it might prejudice whatever you decide to proceed with. You may elect, if I understand the site that you would prefer, there's probably much less sensitivity around that than the privately owned ones.
Why wasn't the report, Mr. Glendenning, put in total confidential to start off with?
The parts that are in the report are something that you can discuss openly, Councillor. I gathered that, Councillor Holstein.
But I suppose, Councillor Holstein, it may not be what other councillors intend to do. So that is the question in terms of discussing particular sites.
So we're moving into confidential because we believe that some of these councillors might talk inappropriately about other sites that have been identified.
Well, not inappropriately, just disclose other sites that have not previously been disclosed. And we haven't voted that way yet, so that's what we're discussing at the moment. Councillor McGregor, I've got you listed to speak.
I echo the sentiment of Councillor Holstein. I'm pleased to see him provide some leadership from the Deputy Mayor's position on this issue. I don't think it's appropriate that we have to go into confidential for this. I think we are all fully aware of the issues, and I would trust that we would be mature and informed enough to adhere to the regulations and guidelines. We've already hoodwinked the public tonight and sold them a pup on the first resolution. I would like to think that we can at least speak in front of them and face them if we are to proceed and do the same tonight with the second.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. So I'm going to put the motion moved by Councillor Sundstrom, seconded by Councillor Burke.
This is to go into confidential.
It is.
So if this fails, then we don't go into confidential.
That's.
Move to not go into public.
I beg your pardon, Councillor.
Move to not.
Okay, good, okay.
Just didn't want a lapse occurring like a minute ago.
All right. Councillor Sundstrom, are you just closing on this one?
Well, I didn't, I moved it, but I didn't speak to open it.
Sorry, Councillor Sundstrom.
I'd like the opportunity to do that, and I'd like to inform the councillors and the gallery that the reason why I decided to move the motion as you suggested was to have this debate about whether we should be in confidential or not in confidential. I take Councillor Holstein's point that he doesn't want to be locking up the document. He gave me the number of pages. How many pages, Councillor?
132.
132 pages.
On this item.
Yeah, and those papers are in the public domain already. So you, going into confidential doesn't mean that that information doesn't go to the public. It just means that they don't see the discussion in this section. I'm happy for, as Mr Glendenning suggested, to have certain aspects regarded as confidential and to have open conversation in other areas.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. So putting the motion from Councillor Sundstrom and Burke to move into confidential to discuss those relevant parts. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Burke, Councillor Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Holstein, Mertens, Gale Collins, Matthews, McGregor, Pillen, McLaughlin, Greenaway, Best. So that's lost. If you need two councillors on their feet, Councillor Best. Yep. So, councillors, those in favour of discussing those relevant matters in confidential, please stand. Councillor Sundstrom and Councillor Smith and Councillor Burke. Those opposed? Councillor Holstein, Mertens. Very similar to Councillor Marquette, Councillor Holstein. Mertens, Gale Collins, Matthews, McGregor, Pillen, McLaughlin, Greenaway, Hogan and Best. So, councillors, we're moving on to item 2.1. The Gosford Regional, yes, Councillor Holstein.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a motion and I've delivered that to the staff and I've given a copy to the councillors. If I have a second, Madam Mayor, I will...
Yes, so we'll just get it up on the board. So seconded by Councillor Best for the purpose of debate. Councillor Holstein.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, first of all, to the staff, I don't intend to speak of anything in confidential. I will speak to the report that I've been given that is out for the public. Can I firstly thank the staff for the report? I believe that there's been a significant amount of time and effort by the staff in putting this together. The motion I put before you is not a debate in regard to the recommendation as much as to the site. And that's what we need to resolve here, is which site we move forward with. I have put a motion forward, councillors, that has 10 points within the motion, because some of those additional points are addressing some of the issues that will come back to us at later points in regard to it. First of all, why the waterfront? Why have I identified as that should be the option site? I do for a couple of reasons. I've been around council for many, many years, and I'm aware of 4 plans that have been put up over the years for the city to advance Gosford and to move the waterfront forward. And every time we've had these plans, it was deja vu on Monday as the government said, we're going to do this, but we're going to start in Kibble Park. You mean times we've started in Kibble Park? It's had more makeovers than I've had hot dinners. We start always the plans in Kibble Park, and the government wants to then come back to us and we'll do the waterfront. Well, I have no difficulty with what they're planning for Kibble Park, but it's the follow-through. It's the follow-through what will come from that. And the only time we got some follow-through is when the Gosford school site was then sold off and we started getting some development. Now, hang on, not agreeing to that because some of that was buggered up and didn't get certain things right. But we've never followed through on the plan. I want us to be able to support the revitalisation of the waterfront. But the revitalisation of the waterfront will require the RPAC to be positioned down there as part of that overall revitalisation. My argument this evening is to counteract the report that's been put to the council, because the main issue there became heritage. And I believe heritage is not an issue. Councillors, if you go through my motion, I've resolved I have put forward that the site be the Rotary Park, or as it's now commonly known for the last 5 years, Poppy Park, the part adjoining the road reserve of Vaughan Avenue and the southern tip of Leagues Club Park as the nominated site for the proposed art centre. I've gone through the rest of the recommendations as per the officers putting there, but I've included several others. And firstly is, councillors, to note that whilst the preferred option, including the Central Coast Conservatorium, whilst the preferred location should include the conservatorium, aspects of design or operational practicality not meet their needs, that council seek the government to allocate the allotted funds for the Central Coast Conservatorium to their site in Georgiana for upgrade. 6, that council note the importance of the continued protection of the Memorial Park, which is not part of the proposal, and ensure that any works of the adjoining preferred site not unduly impact but enhance its presence and its usage, and be done in liaison with the Gosford RSL sub-branch, who has tenure over the site and its importance of that site as a memorial. 7, that the parts of the site works with the Rotary staircase and time capsule, with acknowledgement of the past works of Rotary on the site, be relocated to the southern side of the Memorial Park to allow pedestrian access to the lower southern park area. That the significant trees identified in the ecological tree assessment be retained and protected in future works. I've noted that out of the report, and none of them fall into the category, of where the works would take place. No, and there's 8 significant trees there. That the council prepare a further report to respects of the additional funding for the project, and report to include funding, arts funding opportunities, consideration of the sale of the Broadwater Hotel site, I'll get into that a little bit more, and the aspect of inclusion for funding of the Central Coast Conservatorium. Opportunities for them to advance the site should they go with us, or in fact, if they should seek, because it doesn't meet needs, to go back up onto Georgiana. And that we advise government. This tonight is about advising government. So why the waterfront? I've explained.
Councillor Holstein, I notice your time is up. Did you need a further minute?
For this matter, I would seek an extension, please, councillors. Thank you. Why the waterfront? The waterfront argument that was put up by our consultants, and I do note this from the consultants, please, that they pointed out within their report how the information they had was secondary at this point. They didn't have confirmation on a lot of the aspects and issues. And I do have to say that on your report that you've received from the consultant, They showed a very old map of the former wharf of Gosford, because a huge part of their argument or their belief that there is heritage significance was based on this wharf. And they showed an old plan of the wharf. I'm just trying to find the page, councillors. Very extensive document here. I'm going through 132 pages. That's on page 69. Have a look at the old wharf, which is the survey wharf of the 1881 wharf, the isthmus of land that comes out. Now, that's been replicated on one of the plans on the very next page, page 70, which would give you an impression that the wharf sits directly under Poppy Park. Councillors, in the motion I've given you, and I don't know if they can put it up on the screen, I have one of James Kerry's postcards. It is a postcard of 1908 and shows the Gosford waterfront. That's the one I gave you today. You may well be able to identify Poppy Park by the single tree at the very end of the escarpment that comes down where is now the rotary staircase moving down. If you look at the isthmus, which is just a breakwater construction, you'll see the wharf situated further several hundred metres out beyond that. That is the wharf. This photo is 1908. That's been ascertained by the buildings such as the Art Centre, the old School of Arts, and also the Anglican Church, which is on that side, and the fact that what was then Waterfront Park, soon to be Graham Park, in another 30 years after that they turned it into Graham, that the date of the area is 1908, and I confirmed that with our historian today. You'll see, councillors, that the wharf is well removed from where Poppy Park is, so every context in here that the memorial and heritage value of Poppy Park is not relevant.
Councillor Holstein, I'll indulge you for a further half minute, but then I will ask you to wrap up, please.
This matter is extremely important, Madam Mayor. I need to put the argument across, councillors, that the report you have here that talks about the heritage value of Poppy Park, if that's what you want to call it, is not relevant to the wharf. That the issues of Memorial Park are protected, the significant trees are protected. We go back to this site. Why we moved off it in the first place, I don't understand. But I believe it has merit in being the opportunity. And I will get into the issue of funding because I do highlight it. This is only a commitment to the site. Councillors, we don't own the Poppy Park, but it was originally identified and accepted by the government. We do own the Broadwater site. We've just had an argument, or there's been a discussion, minus me, about the library. One of the suggestions within mine is we look for the funding, and all of the options cost more than what's currently available. And I'm saying that if we look to those options, we can sell the Broadwater site as consider the sale of that to support the Arts Centre. So there's a funding option there. But guess what? If you take the officer's recommendation and put it up on the Broadwater hotel site, you can't sell the waterfront. You may or may not have money because you've got a discussion on what you're going to do with Parkside. It's a more common sense attitude and a possible funding attitude to further advance the waterfront revitalisation. The Poppy Park was originally identified without the fear of what is the heritage item that has come in the report. All I'm asking of the councillors in my motion is that the argument put to us that that wasn't viable is in fact incorrect.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein.
And it does fit, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Best, did you second this? Did you want to speak to it as a seconder?
There's no opposition, I won't speak. Is there any opposition?
Look, I'll be putting up an amendment, but
okay.
so if you'd like to speak.
Could I ask a couple of questions, if I may, just before I make any comment on it?
Yes, Councillor Best.
Julie, Ms Vaughan, you're right. My iPad has died and I'm manually going back to the future here. The amount that's currently in the budget for this project, from memory, 12, 10,
through you, Madam Mayor, we have funding commitments. So from the federal government, we have a funding commitment of $10 million. From the state government, which we are required to provide documentation for by Monday, we have a funding commitment of $12 million, and the former Gosford Council also committed $10 million.
You were instrumental in the delivery of the Wyong Arts House behind us here. I haven't got the exact figure, and I'm not expecting an exact figure tonight, but around 15 million to deliver that, plus drainage and car park, Julie?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the construction cost for the art house was $12.7 million.
12.7, Louise. 12.7. We're talking the car park, how much it was. 12.7 plus the, well, let's be fair, plus the drainage and the car park, which is another couple of million. Yeah.
Well, I mean, through you, Madam Mayor, the drainage was
For the
a
whole
required
precinct.
amount of work
Yeah.
that was not necessarily just
12.7
related to the art
million
house.
is a fair figure. Okay, I just wanted to qualify that. We're running into this issue because of the government requirement, and I noted, and I've got to be careful because we're all in open session here, aren't we? I can have all the documents out now, can't I? Beauty. Oh, my iPad's died. Well, there is a letter from the government, from one of the directors, which I haven't got the letter in front of me, I'm sorry. It's in the iPad, and it's not in this document. Oh, it might be. And it says, I can say this, can't I? And it says that it wants a business plan. And it wants it within 6 weeks of the date of the letter. Please. It doesn't say, if you don't do it, we're going to cut your funding and you throw it at the same time. How do we get into this staff report that it says in the report, and I can't find the page, but it says, I quote, it is likely to jeopardise the funding. How do we get to likely jeopardising the funding from a letter in the confidential, which is now no longer confidential, thank goodness, community, that says we just want a business plan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, the original funding commitment was made in 2014 and at this stage it is still only a funding commitment. So the state government have asked for confirmation in a business plan to confirm that we are serious about building this project.
But that is reliant on the letter. That opinion comes from that letter, doesn't it, that's in the business paper?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, we've also had a number of meetings with the funding body, and the tone of those meetings was very clear to us that if we don't provide the business case within 6 weeks of that letter, which will be by Monday of next week, the state government will very seriously look at the commitment that it made in 2014. So that, hence the slightly forceful way we've brought this on and the amount of work that we've done, so that we put the council in the best position possible to identify a site so we can complete the business case over the weekend and submit it.
So that's $10 million potentially they may take office, is that
12
correct?
million.
$12 million they may take office. And the overall cost at the moment of the development in the town centre is 60...
I'm sorry?
We're in the IPAC now.
I'm sorry, Councillor Best, I don't understand.
Well, how much? I haven't got. What's the bottom line now?
So, Councillor Best, can I just clarify? You're talking about the recommended site in the original report.
Yeah.
You're asking about
Yes.
the estimated cost
how much?
of that.
Yes, yes, thank you.
So, who would like to answer that? Mr.
Mr.
Dowling, is that
Dowling.
you?
60 something, isn't it?
Through you,
Close
Madam. Through Madam Mayor, on the recommended site, we're talking a total cost of 76, Councillor.
76. I'm sorry, just a mere 12 they're missing. 76 million.
Councillor Holstein.
No, just I need a clarification. Councillor Best, you're
Huh?
asking about the performing arts side, or you back on a
Oh,
library issue?
the original one and the recommendation by staff.
The original Broadwater.
Yeah, the one that's in the report. So, can I ask through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Holstein, Chris, I've seconded for purposes of debate because I wouldn't be disrespectful enough to let a former mayor and state member with the knowledge you've got not be able to speak tonight, so that's why I seconded it. But I want to understand is the 32
Sorry,
million...
Councillor Best, can I just interrupt? I believe there's a clarification that's necessary.
Oh, okay.
Through you, Madam Mayor, beg your pardon, that was a typo. 66 million, Councillor Best.
66, I was close, 66 million. Thank you, Chris. So, if I may, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Holstein, that's the reason I seconded, so we could hear from you. The $32 million that's in the budget, as Ms Vaughan's outlined, Poppy Park site, would you, at the first lick, be suggesting it's 32 million, we cut the cloth to that, or are you going out to the 66? That's what I tried to establish with those numbers. Thank you for your...
For Councillor Best.
Thank you.
if you
Hey,
look
Chris,
at my
I just gave you a
motion-
chance to talk, mate. Don't attack me.
And I'll remind Councillor Best, if you come to the presentations, you would see there were similar costings across the board on all the sites and a variance across them, not sufficient funding. When I moved in part 9, that the council prepare a further report to the respects of additional funding of the project, the report to include further government art funding opportunities and consideration of the sale of the Broadwater site to actually meet some of those short costs. Whether the cloth be cut back, well, that's a decision beyond. We've got to at least be able to put a business plan forward. You've got to identify the site. And this was what this is about. There's no commitment here to funding other than ensuring that funding's not lost. And the costs need to be a further consideration of council. But once a business plan is together, how do you do a business plan if you don't know where you're going to put it? The argument tonight is location, Councillor Best.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. Councillor Best, are you still going?
Yeah, look, I said to a few people this afternoon, and the public are watching, I genuinely do not know what to do with this. I just don't. And I've been here reading reports for a very, very long time, and I read them reasonably efficiently because I've been taught how to do it, and goodness knows how the rest of the new council is struggling to deal with this issue. And I mean that in all sincerity. I'm not having a go at anyone. So the reports that have been given, and Brian, your staff have been running to do this. It's not, I'm not going to get in here and start bashing the staff because the report's shallow enough that I dive in, I'll break my neck. You understand that, Mike understands that. This report has just been thrown together, and it's not your fault that it's thrown, but you've been given a deadline, do it or else. It's a gun at our head by the state government, supposedly, and I need to really drill down on that. Quite frankly, if we thought the library was a dog's breakfast, this is just diabolical that we're going to go into this with this business plan sitting before us. We don't know sites, you don't know site qualities. I mean, Chris, I can't, for all the tea in China, convince my constituents of the Budgewoi ward that spending $66 million plus 20% overrun, because this document is exactly the same as the library document. It is going to give you a 20% overrun. At the end of the day, as Bruce has outlined, that's your best guesstimate on these kinds of geotechs, on these kinds of ground truthings, on this kind of rigour. You're going to look at 20%. So that's it's $90 million again. Here we go, it's deja vu. So we're looking, and I'm not playing with the figures here, that's the kind of number that you're going to end up with this facility. And that's because the state government's got a $12 million gun pointed at us. Well, I mean, we're going to save $12 million and go and blow 30 million. I just don't see the math in that. I can't convince the people of Budgewoi or San Remo or Summerland Point that me putting up my right hand for very likely $90 million in Gosford for a business plan that the staff know in their hearts, they've done their job, they do it without fear or favour. When they're told to do something by the general manager, they do it, and then the council tells the general manager. And that's what we've gone and done. And these people are staying up till midnight, I know, trying to get the documentation to us. I mean, we had a meeting on Monday, councillors, on Monday, and we couldn't have this information in the Monday report. Why? Because it wasn't available. That's how fast they're running. And Madam Mayor, if I could get up on the screen some photos that I've asked to go up, that's just run through these quickly in my last few moments. That's the Wyong Art House, ladies and gentlemen, that was built by Wyong Council, fully internally funded, and Julie was the champion of it that drove it to the end. Got it on the ground for $12.7 million. You can put the first photo up, $12.7 million, take a bow. That is an enormous outcome. I wasn't real sure even then. It took us about 5 years to go through this and get site selection. We rejected site after site. I hear I'm a little extension, but it is, as Councillor Holstein said, very important to get this message over. We rejected River Road site, Julie, you remember.
Councillor, you're saying you need a further minute?
Yeah, give me a minute. Finally. Okay. 6 months in, I got a minute. That's pretty good. We had River Road site just down the road here, for the council might not know it, on the riverside. $45 million it came in. And we went, 45 million, like, we might be able to fund that. We can't do it.
and we had done all the ground truthing, we spent money, we'd done geotechs, we'd done preliminary designs, and we walked away from it. We lost a bit of money doing that, but thank goodness we did, because we found this site with Julie's team and put it on the ground for 12, with no government funding at all. So you don't have to spend $90 million to get a bloody good bang out of your buck. Where you put it, and Chris is talking about site selection, and that's important, Chris. And the waterfront...
Councillor Holstein.
The waterfront is where the public have
No,
been...
Councillor Holstein.
The waterfront, from what I'm hearing, is where the public have been pushing for many, many years, and we've run up into town because the state government wants us to populate the centre of town. This is crazy. It really is. I don't know where to go with it, and I see you'll move an amendment, but I can't go anywhere near $90 million and have credibility in the north when people can't have their potholes fixed.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Burke.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I support Poppy Park, and I know this hasn't just been brought up, it's been brought up by the previous Gosford Council on numerous occasions, and various sites have been thrown around for many a day. The RSL, they support Poppy Park because there's a certain portion of the RSL that they'll have to use. I call it the Golden Gate, and a lot of our constituents have brought up that we need something down on the waterfront, and I think the performing art would be fantastic. It's the Golden Gate for the entrance, Saratoga, Avoca, Terrigal, Kincumber. The main objection about Poppy Park in previous times was that, all right, the poppies will be there and will be there for perpetuity. The next year it moved on to the Skillion. And so that was a fallacy. So let's build the waterfront. Let's get things moving. Let's get, as I said before, cranes in the area, and we build the waterfront. So I agree with Poppy Park to be the performing arts site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Greenaway. Before you do that, Councillor Greenaway, I might just foreshadow an amendment. I won't put it up there at the moment, but I did distribute it to councillors, and it's along the lines of the motion that's in the paper, but includes an extension to look at the a precinct comprising the RPAC and the library. So I will speak to that a little bit later. But Councillor Greenaway.
Madam Mayor, just a brief comment. I just couldn't let it go when Councillor Best referred to the art house costing $12 million to get it on the ground. I just think, for the public record, I think that's a bit of an underestimation. I just didn't want it to go unchallenged.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can confirm that the construction costs were $12.7 million.
Okay, but the cost of the art house, though, for the general community, when they hear that, there are additional costs, or there were additional costs associated with it.
Councillor Greenaway, it's not entirely relevant to the debate.
Well, I just thought I couldn't let that go without... just as long as the community is aware, it was more than 12.7.
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, I just want to say I'm in support of the Poppy Park precinct. I think generally the public have wanted it down the waterfront for many years, and I understand there may be some site constraints, which may actually mean that we do have a smaller building, and that we may not spend as much money. And I do think the idea of being able to sell the Broadwater site actually boosts its business, the business merits of actually looking at the site, whereas you go to Broadwater, you can't get the land back. So I'm in support of the actual site down on the waterfront.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillors, I might just add my bit in opposing the Poppy Park site. So I just remind councillors that the site came up many years ago and was very controversial within our community, and I think that controversy would happen again for a whole range of reasons. Separately to that, though, I am very keen and very supportive of the revitalisation of Gosford City Centre. I don't believe that putting RPAC on the waterfront will achieve that, and certainly will not achieve that easily because it won't have the infrastructure around it, whereas putting RPAC up within the city centre does stimulate a whole lot of activity, and it's, in my view, the low-hanging fruit to put the RPAC in the city centre where there will be activity happening. I think putting it on the waterfront will be quite controversial in terms of any consideration of then building around it, and I believe that that would be quite counterproductive in what we're trying to achieve with the RPAC. Councillor Pillen, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, I just think it is important that we stick on budget. I know you're saying it's a...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Pillen. Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, look, I think if any of these sites that we're looking at and the budgets that have come in, the costings that have come in, I think as councillors we need to accept that it's, are we prepared to have ratepayers pay for this, the excess? I don't think anyone should go into it expecting further funding, either from the state or federal government. That could be received, but I wouldn't rely on it. You would need to be going into any funding knowing that you're prepared to get ratepayers to pay the excess costs, which we don't know what that could end up being. I think the public has been asking for it to be down on the waterfront for many years. To be honest, I think we're being rushed into a decision, and I don't think that we do have to give that answer by Monday. And I think that given we have Lee Shearer working on a master plan at the moment, asking the community for feedback of where they want the heart of Gosford to be, I think that should actually be taken into consideration as well. But at this stage, I am happy to support seeking further information on the Poppy Park site.
And is there any further discussion or debate? Councillor Best.
I've got to take some advice from our southern colleagues because I just don't know what all this history is. Through you to Councillor Holstein, if I may, Madam Mayor, what you're seeking, Chris, is to test the site, find out what funding's genuinely available, but we're not committing funds tonight. And that might be a question to you and the General Manager. I understand what you got, Chris. I just want to make it real clear that we're not committing funds tonight. So could Chris have a go at that? And I might give the same question to the General Manager and just understand. I don't want to go down this slippery slope and find myself in some interesting hot water. I just want to clarify. Don't call me wrong, just educate me.
Yeah.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, what we're asking you to do is to resolve what site you want. You can't hear me, Councillor Best?
Yeah, you're really faint for some reason. It's not good over here.
I'm a very shy man, Councillor Best. I apologise for that.
Oh, no.
Councillor Best,
accepted.
to answer your question, you're not being asked to make a budget assessment on the future funding of this. That's something that will come at the appropriate time when you adopt a budget in each year. What we're asking you to do in summary is to identify the site so we can let the state funding body know what that site is and have a business case built around that site. That's the sole purpose of this. The driver for this paper coming before the council tonight is purely to make that decision so that we can then let the funding body know where we propose to put this site, because there have been changes over time. The current resolutions of this council under administration were firstly Leagues Club, with an alternate site being what is now the St Helier site. For various reasons flagged when this matter last came before the council, we asked you to consider some further sites, and then you've given us 6 to go and look at, which we went and did, and that's what we're putting before you tonight is, here's the 6 that we've done a lot of analysis on, more analysis than has been done for quite some time on this project, so that you can make the best decision you can with the information that we've been able to strap together since you last looked at it, and put the report back to the state funding body. That's all we're asking you to do in a nutshell. There's some machinery resolutions that are built around that, but that's what we're asking. We're not asking you to commit $50 or $60 million tonight. We're just simply asking you to let us put a business case forward on an identified site. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Best. I don't have any other councillors listed to speak. Councillor Holstein, did you want to close debate?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sorry if I get passionate about it because this has gone on for so long. Yeah, you ought to be scared, Councillor Best, particularly when you throw 90 million at us at 20% overruns and let's get everybody wound up. Mate, you ever know what a banana is? Banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And that's what I'm starting to think, Councillor Best, at times in regard to when you bring that type of argument forward, because it is misleading. Now, there's been a couple of comments, and I know we can't refer to other aspects, but it's been in the paper that the Conservatorium had a site picked out, and they've done a lot of work. And I think the work they've done has been under the pure frustration of not being able to get a resolution on this matter. Mr Glendenning said it, that the current council resolution that was made under administration was for Leagues Club Park. And I only dropped my bundle when that one came out in the public because that was totally inappropriate. So we need to, as he said this evening, pick a site. There is nothing in the motion I've put up. In fact, the motion starts dealing with aspects of what may well be funding. Funding that we may have to cut the cloth because the government funding's not adequate and a range of other things. Councillor Pillen, yes, you worry about the funding, but we're not get ahead of ourselves. We're only identifying the site, and my arguments this evening were about justifying why the site on the waterfront, contrary to the report, was the better site to go. And Madam Mayor, I have to say to you, you were concerned about the controversy of the waterfront. Let me tell you, I'll take you through controversy over the years. I'll take you to the Peninsula Leisure Centre where I actually had my kids' cafe graffitied because people didn't want that. The only concern I got out of it was I worried about the education system because there was a four-letter word that they couldn't spell right. That was controversy. I'll tell you about the brick that went through my wife's window because we touted a Caroline Bay Art Centre with, heaven forbid, a Japanese garden that went through her shop. The threats, the arguments, the complaints, there is nothing that you will do as a councillor that won't gain controversy because guess what? Not everybody in the community is going to be 100% behind it. I went to a public meeting when we built the stadium. Lovely ladies that spat at me at a public meeting because they didn't want to see the bowling club lost for a stadium. But these people come back. The initial impression of things is, that's going to change things. We don't accept change. But will anybody tell me the Peninsula Leisure Centre, the Caroline Bay Art Centre, or in fact, the Central Coast Stadium is not something that's a great asset? You're going to get controversy, Madam Mayor, because people are never happy with things. But nobody says here it's a 20% overrun. Nobody's saying it's 90 million, and nobody's committing a dollar other than to giving a government an indication of where the site is. And I've heard nothing but positives about people who have said yes. They've always thought the waterfront was the great opportunity. And I've even given an opportunity in there that we may meet some of the shortfall or not have to cut the cloth as far as we need because we could consider the Broadwater site.
Councillor Holstein, I am going to ask you to wrap up. You've had a pretty good run on this one, so if I can...
Yeah, I have.
Yes?
Yeah.
So if you could bring it to a close.
My concluding comments would be, councillors, it's got nothing to do with cost at this point. It's got about site selection. If you are all truly committed, as you've said you are, for the revitalisation of our waterfront, Poppy Park is the site for this, and that is the site we should be supporting for this evening and moving forward to at least tell the government.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. So I'll put the motion from Councillor Holstein, seconded by Councillor Best. All in favour? Councillor Holstein, Councillor Gail Collins, Councillor Pillen, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Burke, Councillor Best. Those opposed? Councillor Mehrtens, Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Matthews, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Greenaway, Councillor Hogan and Councillor Smith. Can I just do the numbers? Was that carried? Okay.
I think you're right, but you want to recheck.
I might just check again. So those in favour of Councillor Holstein's motion. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is lost. So, beg your pardon? Either way, it's lost. So I'm going to put the motion that I foreshadowed, which is effectively the motion, the recommendation that appeared in your business paper. The changes, if you look at part 2, there is just an addition that adds, however, following the recent announcement from the Minister for Planning, RPAC will be discussed as part of an integrated precinct together with the Regional Library. And I think just in 3 Part A, it also refers to a precinct. So councillors, as previously indicated, that's that idea of RPAC going through to the Donaldson Street site and how we might create a precinct around there. So I am moving that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sundstrom, thank you. I won't say any more on it. Is there any discussion or debate? Councillor Greenaway. Yes, Councillor Greenaway.
Just a minor one, but remember, just hopefully this will curtail any long-term discussion. But in relation to the Regional Library, we added a sentence acknowledging that we would commit to finding the ET Australia and their tenants some accommodation within the precinct. So
yeah,
because
look, I'm
this
happy
is part
to,
of the precinct,
yeah,
can we
it
just
is.
copy and paste that across?
Absolutely, and we can just note that resolution of council. So are the staff across that? Yes? Councillor Best.
Question, and don't shoot me, I'm just asking, Shane. And the council's got a resolution, I understand, on the books that all our meetings conclude at 10:30 unless we resolve to go forward. Now, this is an extraordinary meeting and I might save us from that problem. But being that I'm not sure if the legislation discriminates between extraordinaries and ordinaries, but if we didn't resolve to go past 10, is anything we're doing now going to be able to be held as legislation? Because we didn't move at 10:30 to extend. Only question.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, you're all likely to be arrested on the way home and thrown in jail.
You're the motorbike rider, not me.
Is that what you... I think you raise a good point, Councillor Best. I'll let Ms Sullivan, because she's agitating.
Hospital pass.
Because I'm nerdier. Failure of a council to follow a specific provision in its code of meeting practice doesn't mean that any decisions made are invalidated. So that's simply a procedural provision we do have in our code of meeting practice.
Just making sure we don't have no legislation. Thanks for asking, Greg. That's good.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillors, I don't... Councillor Holstein, you'd like to speak on this?
I won't miss the opportunity. I don't support the motion that's up there because I don't think that's vision in the side of going into the old Broadwater Hotel whatsoever. I think that's the easy option. I think I don't have no difficulties, and I see what you're trying to do with the issue down with the library. You're not making a decision here. So much for vision of the waterfront. You run the risk, councillors, that the next stage of the plan the state government comes out with, hopefully it's going to be something that will revitalise the waterfront, but that won't be with a regional performing arts. Let's hope they don't choose that site's going to be a great spot for some housing or commercial development, and then you'll all say, oh, Jesus, we should have put Poppy Park and put the conservatory in there. I don't know what your rationale is. Are we that conservative? The plans down there that we talked about before that had been on the agenda for so long got wiped by the administration and come up with a plan. You might as well go on back to Poppy Park. I can't for the life of me understand the lack of vision of wanting to move forward with a building down there. But that's fine. I'll accept the ruling. I don't understand it. As for the Broadwater Hotel site, God love it. I think I had my 21st birthday drink there. And it was probably as exciting as what it will be for anything we can do in a performing arts on that side right alongside the council. And I'm just a little bit disappointed of all these people that stood for council to move forward, and we can't move forward because we're just going to do what's quick, what's easy, and what might be thrown in there. I'm disappointed, councillor, I've got to say. I saw potential within the council to move forward and to have vision. But be very careful and be very mindful of what you may well end up on the waterfront at Gosford. because we don't see what the government's got planned. I think it would be a proactive stance for us if we'd accepted the Poppy Park this evening, but you've made that decision. I'll wear that, but I think you've got it wrong, and I pray, touch wood, I don't come back and say that to you in a couple of years' time when we end up with half-botched mass development on our waterfront, because that's the way the government want to move on that. Hopefully I'm wrong. I can't support that motion because I don't think it's in the interest of the public, but it looks like it's going to get up. It's been caucused on. That's what you want to do. Go for it.
Councillor Holstein. Councillor Sundstrom.
Yeah, I stand to support the motion as a seconder, and I'd like to address some of the things that Councillor Holstein has just brought to the floor. I can't imagine the state government or the federal government having taking the opportunity to slap the community of the Central Coast in the face again. They slapped us in the face with the ATO, they slapped us in the face with the finance buildings, and they would have a death wish, and I mean that, a political death wish, to try to get us again, especially on Poppy Park. I think that the idea of connecting the proposed site for the library through to the Broadwater site is a fantastic idea, and it gives us the opportunity to have what we should have been able to have in the first place with the Performing Arts Centre to be built on the old school site with the library across the road. I think that having the Performing Arts Centre next to the council building in Gosford will activate, and the precinct connecting to the library will activate the Kibble Park area and will activate the Man Street strip down towards our council buildings. I commend the motion. I wish that we had the opportunity to be voting tonight to put a library on that site opposite an already built RPAC, but we have to do what we have to do. Opportunity's been taken away from us. Let's not put any obstacles in the way of the RPAC going ahead now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. Councillor Gail Collins.
Madam Mayor, fellow councillors and executive leaders, I rise to support the motion to look at the Broadwater site. We must be prudent with our ratepayers' money and financially and economically responsible. We have 32 million funding committed, 10 million from federal state government, 12 million from state government, and 10 million from the former Gosford Council. Let's reinvigorate Gosford so it's a regional strategic centre that we can all be proud of. This is an exciting chapter for Gosford. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pillen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Monday, I raised the issue at Council to ask, has anyone considered combining the library facility with the Performing Arts Centre, and the answer was no. So I commend you bringing that up tonight. That was also maybe something we can look at, a joint venture for airspace above that. I cannot support this position in the main street of Gosford. I think, as Councillor Holstein said, we've missed out on an opportunity here of vision and tourism, something to be unique on the waterfront and to bring people in from out of the region. Yeah, I'm floored too. I really am disappointed that this is a decision to look at this particular site. I won't be voting for it. However, I think if we are going to move forward with the heart of Gosford to be in at Kibble Park, then I think that should be seriously considered to have the Performing Arts Centre, if it's not going to be on the waterfront, to be overlooking Kibble Park rather than in the main street of Gosford, and potential of combining the two so that you're not looking at site costs on two separate sites, combining the two together.
Thank you, Councillor Pillen. Councillor McGregor.
I'm back. Don't worry, I won't take long, mate. Look, I just wanted to say...
Sorry, Councillor McGregor, I have got a motion that the motion...
I was standing on my feet to speak. You called me to speak, and then he stood up after and said I wasn't here. Was I here or was I not here? You saw me. You called me. I stood up.
Sorry, Councillor McGregor, it is a procedural motion, so I need to put that the motion be put.
Of course, you would like to silence.
Moved by Councillor Burke. Do I need a seconder?
No, you don't need a seconder for that.
All right, so I'll put that the motion be put. All in favour, please raise your hand. No, those opposed? Okay, Councillor McGregor.
I hope that's not the last time there's a vote with only one person going that way. I just wanted to put it on the record that I am supportive of this motion. The second option was the one put forward by Councillor Holstein. I think both proposals had merit, but on the weight of it, the evidence and this issue's been around for a long time. People want to see it done. The extra car parking spaces and some of the other things in it certainly make it an attractive option. But I do want to reflect on what some of my colleagues said about vision and being bold and having leadership. And I'd like them to consider when they go home tonight, forevermore, what about the first thing we voted on tonight? Where was that vision? Where was that boldness? Where was that resolute progress that we were so keen on having? It was in absentia, and I'm guessing it won't be the last time that we're going to see that. I support this motion. I hope the precinct comes together, if we ever do get our library, because the first motion tonight significantly jeopardises that, and it significantly jeopardises the precinct, which is mentioned in this motion.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Greenaway, are you wanting to... Councillor Greenaway.
To thank Councillor Holstein for his insights and everything in relation to Poppy Park. And I have to say at one point I was very persuaded to have a waterfront location, but I've listened to the community and I've looked at all the reports and I've looked at the integrated precinct and everything, and so I will be supporting this current motion.
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. Councillors, I put the motion... You've got a question. Councillor Holstein.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just ask the councillors to turn to page 31 while the officers answer this question for me? There is a map there that shows the Broadwater Hotel site, and on that map it also happens to show the Parkside. Do they adjoin, or is there a property in the middle that needs to be purchased?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Holstein, there's a property in the middle that would need to be acquired if you were to have continuity.
It is a property that needs to be acquired. Okay. Thank you. We don't own all that site.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. I'll put the motion... Sorry? Oh, Councillor Best.
Yeah.
I thought you'd already spoken.
I haven't spoken to this part.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Best.
Chris, thank you for your insight, and I mean it, and I understand your emotion to this tonight. I don't understand. Well, I do understand it because you've lived this thing, and I think what Councillor Greenaway said was nice as well, that, you know, Chris has genuinely brought to our table some learning. I didn't know all this stuff. But councillors, I put up the Performing Arts Centre there to let you have a little look at what you can get for the numbers, but imagine if you had something like that interfacing with the waterfront, possibly a bit of a nautical theme to it. You've got your park spilling out in the foreground. You've got your sculptures in the foreground. You're activating your ground. You've got an Indigenous flavour around it as well. You've got the whole lot going on. And when you drive over the bridge, you see this building that says Gosford, a little bit of style. Or you can take this building and put it into a box uptown and lock it away next to other big boxes and just see a sign on the front of it. Or you can see something like the Performing Art building sitting in the park, looking straight out across the Broadwater, with people in function rooms enjoying that vista, as I say, with sculptures in the park, with people busking in the park, with possibly small acts performing in the park on a Friday night under the stars with a cuppa and a blanket and their families. That kind of community activation is what was available to this. That vision was available that I could see from the distance of the Forgotten North. You will not pass by this way again. This is it. And I believe the community that I'm talking to from down south are really wed to wanting to have this activation and interface with the waterfront. I don't believe the community want it uptown. I think the government want it uptown so that they can have it in their grand Dr. Evil plan to activate Kibble Park. I mean, Kibble Park's a lovely place to go, But when you actually activate that Brisbane water and you get the marine activity going across on the water, which will come in the next councils to come, everything is a stepping stone. But Chris is 100% correct. This opportunity was a hugely lost opportunity to put such a kind of standalone architectural opportunity. And that's what, when you go past the art house tonight driving home, just flip to the driveway and go down on the right, and hopefully the lights will be on yours. I think it's a bit late. But that kind of architectural building looking out across the water. And even more special than that, because you've got much more budget. Something that isn't just a building with people in it, but it's a huge architectural statement that the Central Coast is alive. That's what you've got. But for some reason we seem to go on a hill. We're going to put disability people on the hill. We're going to cut into a site and cost ourselves a fortune. And we're going to ask people to try and access it around a site that's like a 9-metre cut and try and park a car on a hill and take your kids there or your grandparents there. Or you can
Councillor Best, the site isn't on a particular hill.
When you look at the topography, it's a 9-metre cut from front to back. It isn't level. It's not level. When you look at the benching that's already on it, when you take that into account, so it's not level. And if you park a car up in the town, it's not level. But anyway, what will be done, but I lament, as Chris does, that this is one of those wonderfully lost opportunities you'll never get to drive past.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Gail Collins, you had a question. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to Director Dowling, please. Director Dowling, can you clarify for me, if my memory serves me correctly, in that if this site was to be developed, Main Street, that we would have water views? Is that correct? So we would be overlooking the water space, just not right on the water edge?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Gail Collins, it really depends on the final design. Under the current design, there is considerable elevation of the building. It's a multi-level building. It's not all on grade. So there are possibilities of water views. It really depends on what's developed further to the left of the building towards the Broadwater. But given that the the ATO has already been developed and the State Office building is not going to be much higher, the only area that's in question then is the future development of the St Heliers site, which could be a little bit higher than that. But it really depends on the final design.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Are you right? Debate is closed. I'll put the motion moved by myself and seconded Councillor Sundstrom. All in favour, please. Councillor Mertens, Sundstrom, Gail Collins, Matthews, McGregor, Greenaway, Hogan and Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Holstein, Councillor Pillen, McLaughlin, Burke and Best. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. The meeting is closed. Thank you.